but the more I turned it over, the more something stirred in me, so I went to the workbench and made 20 arrows from 5 wood and 5 iron ore, a rank 2 workbench being able to produce ordinary arrows after scanning a bow or crossbow. Back at the grill, I sent the request back to her. On her end, watching the request sit unaccepted, Soil couldn't help growing anxious, wondering if she'd done something wrong. And when she suddenly saw it returned, she got flustered and fired off a message, insisting she was serious, that I was in more danger and needed the repeating crossbow more, that her place was safe. I told her not to worry, that I knew that nowhere here was safe and I'd re-edited the request, and to just accept it. The new request offered my blue wind chaser bow and 20 arrows for her blue Juga repeating crossbow. She didn't know how to respond, but figured I must have thought it through, so she agreed, and I received the wind chaser bow back along with the arrows. Then she hurried to ask why I'd swapped a rank 1 bow for her rank 0 crossbow, when I should have kept it. The wind chaser bow read as rank 1, excellent quality, attribute that raised initial arrow velocity by 30%, described as a compound bow 1 meter long with a 300 meter range, named wind chaser because it could chase the wind. I played with the crossbow in my hand and told her, smiling, that I didn't know how to use a bow, that I'd tried today and couldn't even get a shot off, that a crossbow suited me better, and that with her long-range ability the bow was perfect for her, simple as that. She declined a few more times, but I shot every refusal down, and in the end she had to accept. She was in a good mood, not because she'd traded a rank 0 item for a rank 1, but because she'd helped me and I'd helped her. 2 acts of kindness traded back and forth. We talked a while more, and after I walked her through the rank 2 shelter experience, she had her own upgrade to handle, so we both hung up. Meanwhile, I ate roasted meat, my second piece now since my appetite had grown so much, and checked the Juga repeating crossbow's attributes. It read as rank 0, excellent quality, attribute of magazine capacity raised to 15, described as a single-person version improved by many hands, a lightweight body with immense power, a 20-meter range and 10-meter maximum power range, the enlarged magazine currently holding 15 rounds. The crossbow could shore up my mid-range gap, easy to operate and capable of continuous fire, and I caught myself wishing I could fit it with a scope. A small regret since I had neither the craftsmanship nor anyone who could modify it. Satisfied, I put it away and made 30 bolts for 3 wood and 3 iron ore, 15 loaded into the magazine and 15 stored in my inventory. With that done, I calmly ate my steak and ran another trade over to Songaru, which she accepted politely after some hesitation. Then I cleaned up the grill, went to the workbench, and queued 2 manufacturing tasks, since a rank 2 workbench could run 2 at once. 50 torches and 300 small round shields. With automatic production set, a glance told me the torches would finish soon and the shields by early morning. Everything arranged, I went to the bathroom and took a cold shower with the water left in the wooden bucket, reminding myself, mind drifting as I washed, that I'd forgotten to fill the rooftop water tank today and needed to fetch water tomorrow. Men shower fast, and the moment I stepped out a cold draft hit me, so I shivered and hurried back to the bedroom to burrow under the covers, then opened the chat channel to unwind, wanting after a busy day to see what entertainment the other survivors had on offer. Someone was complaining that a cute little beast had camped at his door all day, so he couldn't get out to find food, and was starving. The replies wasted no time roasting him. One telling him to just eat meat since there was meat outside. Another telling him to eat bread when there was no meat instead of starving himself. A third suggested the thing was probably guarding him because it was hungry too, and that he should make a contribution so neither of them would go hungry. I laughed out loud reading it, since the survivors were clearly adapting to this place and finding the room to play around again. I chimed in that I'd gone out today, that there were quite a lot of wild animals about, and that hunting had a chance to drop a treasure chest. When someone asked doubtful whether every animal dropped one, I confirmed it was true and that I dug up a rabbit nest today and pulled a wooden chest. Then I added that the shoe world encouraged going out, that both gathering and hunting paid rewards, that you just had to carry weapons, and that plenty of level 2 players were selling cost-effective iron knives and iron spears on the trade channel right now. I nodded along to the channel myself, because the shoe world was starting to feel like a company to me. Work hard as required and you wouldn't be cut. Do well and your quality of life climbed, and anyone who ignored its reminders would eventually be eliminated. Just as I was studying the survivor's shifting state of mind, a system notice popped, telling me a private reply had come in on one of my old buy orders. That caught my interest fast, because what I'd been seeking on those orders was glass, blueprints in anything excellent quality or higher, all of it things I needed. The message was from Wang Ro, who greeted me as a big shot, said we were in the same area, and he'd seen my buy order, that he'd gotten a blueprint today and wanted to trade it for some supplies. I had an impression of this Wang Ro, his avatar a clean-cut man in gold-rimmed glasses, probably under 30, fairly active in the regional channel on day 1, though I'd stopped watching that channel since, and hadn't seen him speak again. I told him I remembered him, and asked what blueprint it was and what he wanted for it. He laid it out plainly that he'd been suckered in by the Blood Fiend Alliance's recruitment, that after joining all supplies had to be handed over, that they assigned daily tasks and withheld food if you failed them. During the protection period, he could gather resources to clear the tasks, but with so many beasts outside now it had become impossible. He went on that he'd risked going out today and found a chest with a blueprint inside, that he had no intention of handing it to the Blood Fiend Alliance, that he wanted to barter for items and leave them, but that everyone else in the regional channel was too afraid of the Blood Fiend Alliance to trade with him. He'd seen me face the Blood Fiend Alliance down in the group, so he knew I wasn't scared, which was why he'd come to me for food and weapons. And then he sent the blueprint's description. It was a common wooden recliner blueprint, a lifestyle item that supposedly greatly improved quality of life, suited to sunny lawns and outdoor camping and relaxation. Crafted from 2 wood, reading it, I judged the recliner even more useless than the charcoal blueprint, because how many people would want a lounge chair to relax in at a time like this? The reason nobody else would trade for it probably wasn't only fear of the Blood Fiend Alliance, but mainly that the blueprint was junk, and I could picture Wang Ro's excitement opening the chest and seeing a blueprint, then his despair when he read what it was. One unlucky kid, and not the only one, since a batch of useless goods had been hitting the market lately, including a rickshaw blueprint I had seen listed forever with no buyers. At least the recliner beat a rickshaw, and the real question was what he wanted in exchange, so I cut to it and asked him directly. Wang Ro had been waiting anxiously, afraid I'd refuse outright and leave him no reason to approach me again, since even this useless blueprint had taken a lot of persuading to be issued. He answered that for food he just needed enough for one day, and for items he wanted a small round shield and a spear, since he still had to go out and fight tomorrow. I thought it over and offered 5 servings of dry rations, 1 small round shield, and 1 wooden-handled iron spear, and asked if that was fair. He agreed at once that it worked, then told me in advance that he'd left the Blood Fiend Alliance today, and they'd said they would blacklist him, so trading with me might displease them. I had no idea how the Blood Fiend Alliance meant to blacklist a survivor thousands of miles off, and I didn't much care whether they were displeased, since they were already displeased with me. So I told him not to worry about it, that I was simply making a trade, and the Blood Fiend Alliance's mood was no concern of mine. He thanked me and said he'd send the request, and the listing came through, his common recliner blueprint for 5 dry rations, 1 small round shield, and 1 wooden-handled iron spear. I told him to wait a moment while I prepared the spear, crawled out of my sleeping bag, went to the workshop to store the 50 finished torches, produced a wooden-handled iron spear, and once the goods were ready, I confirmed the trade and took in the recliner blueprint. Wang Ro thanked me again and asked to add me as a friend, promising to trade me anything good he turned up and to help me gather intelligence on the Blood Fiend Alliance, and to come to me for advice if anything arose. I didn't refuse, because while I didn't care about the Blood Fiend Alliance, our relationship with them was strained, and I'd never turn away someone volunteering to collect information that might prove useful one day. After agreeing, Wang Ro humbly asked for some wilderness survival pointers, and I had to admit his eloquence and emotional intelligence were excellent, smooth in conversation, quick to back off the instant he sensed I'd lost interest in talking. The kind of person it was genuinely hard to dislike. Once I'd hung up with him, I went looking for Wang Jian, asking him what the Blood Fiend Alliance's situation was now since I'd stopped watching the regional channel, because I wanted to understand their operating model, and only he and Yu Yang were reasonably well informed on that sort of thing. Wang Jian said he wasn't clear on the specifics, only that the Blood Fiend Alliance currently recruited through internal referrals, that joining meant handing over your supplies for unified allocation and receiving a self-defense item in return, which got revoked if you failed the daily tasks. I asked what the self-defense item was, whether it was a weapon, and he said he wasn't sure, that those who joined signed a contract notarized by the Shu World, so they couldn't leak information, but that it probably wasn't a weapon, since a weapon wouldn't carry that much pull. I asked whether anyone had ever left the Alliance, and he said very few, because with all their supplies surrendered they couldn't survive after leaving, and they couldn't reveal anything about the Alliance afterward either. At that my heart stirred, a sense that I'd overlooked something I couldn't quite name. Yu Yang put in that the Blood Fiend Alliance was so mysterious that plenty of supply-short survivors in the regional channel had already joined. Xiao Huo jumped in heated as ever, calling them an evil organization, saying he'd known that Zhang Pio before, that those people wouldn't listen to him and would get what was coming to them. He was worked up because none of them believed him, believing that scoundrel instead, and Yu Aguk told him to calm down, that he just couldn't hold his temper, that the regional channel only had to poke him and he lit up. From all of it, I gathered Xiao Huo was still throwing himself at the Blood Fiend Alliance and the regional channel over and over, losing every time and going right back in, endlessly tangled with them. After chatting a while longer in the small group without prying loose any more inside information, I exited the chat. I put all 50 torches up for sale at 3 wood apiece, then settled back into bed and decided to draw a card before sleeping, since synthesis ate mental energy and using it before bed meant it would all recover by the next day. Propped against the headboard, I opened the trading channel with a thought, set the filter to blue items, and arranged the list from cheapest to most expensive. 4 cheap materials stood out as good test fodder for the furnace. There was an electric toothbrush that the description deadpan was a toothbrush with no electricity, and a worn stone that ran hot all on its own like a hand warmer. Premium black iron wood, the channel rated as hard as raw iron, and good for both building and weaponsmithing, and an ice crystal pulled from permafrost that drank heat to keep a room cool. The catch on the crystal was that after a full day of absorbing, it had to be parked below freezing to recharge before I could use it again. I spent 44 units of iron block and bought 1 toothbrush, 5 warm stones, 9 units of black iron wood, and 6 ice crystals, then rubbed my hands together and decided it was time for the lottery, starting small just to warm up. I summoned the synthesis furnace and fed it a crossbow bolt as the main material, with 3 blue fangs the leopards and civets had dropped as auxiliary. The furnace read back a 70% success rate and a 20% mutation rate, and without a second thought, I confirmed it. Out came a single fang armor-piercing arrow, blue quality, and my luck was apparently in for the night. A clean hit on the very first try. I checked it over with a grin, and the panel told me it was a Tier 0, premium arrow built to punch through armor defense. This was a keeper, a real trump card, the kind of thing that would chew through scaled beasts and armored people once I started running into them. I tucked the armor-piercing arrow away and set up the second synthesis straight away, this time using the electric toothbrush as the main material. Wood and stone as auxiliary both crawled in under 40%, but iron blocks pushed the rate up to 70, so I locked in 5 iron blocks and confirmed. The furnace tore a surge of mental energy out of me. A puff of black smoke curled off the top, and my heart skipped a beat. The furnace fed the bad news straight into my head. The synthesis had failed, but a second message followed right behind it. The residue had been absorbed and my talent upgrade progress had ticked up by 0.1%. More information kept rolling in as I sat there, and I finally understood the shape of the thing. The combined will of the shoe world and Blue Star had fused the synthesis furnace into my soul and turned it into my talent skill, and it sat now in a state that was half matter, half spirit. As my own ability, it could grow by swallowing spiritual material through synthesis, and it grew whether the synthesis succeeded or failed. I'd finally learned how to level my talent. I already knew from the chat channel that talents could be upgraded, but the survivors agreed that everyone's method was different, that 2 people both holding strength enhancement might still have to climb entirely separate ladders to upgrade it. Knowing the method was one thing, but the progress bar was so thin I didn't bother giving it any special weight yet. Next, I lined up something that actually mattered, partly to test a hunch about my talent. The hunch was simple, that if a synthesis didn't mutate, the result would almost certainly be an enhanced version of the main material. I picked the repeating crossbow as the main material, with ice crystal and black iron wood as auxiliary, and after grinding through ratio after ratio, I landed on 4 units of ice crystal and 5 units of black iron wood for the best success rate and the lowest mutation. The furnace offered me 85% success against 20% mutation, and I stared at it nervously and confirmed. As it ripped the mental energy out, my mind went blank, and a wave of drowsiness crashed over me so hard I nearly folded onto the table. I pinched my thigh and used the pain to beat back the sleep, my face screwing up even as joy broke through it, because the furnace had flared orange and the system told me it was a success. An ice pattern repeating crossbow now sat where the old one had been. Orange quality, Tier 0, and I read its panel hungry. It carried a magazine of 15 and an ice arrow skill, a frozen shot that bled 50% off an enemy's movement speed, with the freeze chargeable 5 times before it needed recharging, or a spell below freezing to recover. The description said an unknown ability had processed and enchanted the crossbow into this. I picked it up and turned it over, the body gone dark black and laced with deep blue patterns. The wood swapped out for black iron wood, so the whole thing felt heavy and substantial and cool against my palm. This was incredible. An extra skill, ice arrow, a genuine magic item, and proof my hunch had been right, that synthesis enhanced the main material so long as the mutation rate stayed low. As long as I kept the odds in my favor, there'd be no nightmare scenario where my weapon turned into a pillow on me. I'd meant to run one more to start mapping out the rules behind mutation, but the crossbow alone had eaten 2 whole points of mental energy, and I was finished, too drained to summon the furnace again. I'd saved the mutation research for another night. I dropped back into bed and was asleep before I finished the thought. The night passed without incident. Before dawn, I was already in the courtyard with my tang sword, the sleep having done me a world of good. The morning air had a slight bite to it, the first real chill of autumn, and I was still in summer quick-dry clothes, so I told myself to comb the trading channel that evening for something reasonably priced, and start laying in winter gear. I warmed up, got the blood moving, then ran the Mystic Void Blade technique through once where I stood, and by the time I sheathed the blade, I was soaked in sweat with a faint wisp of steam rising off my head. The sun had climbed through the gaps in the fence and was lying warm across me now, easing my breathing, and I could feel the blood running through my body. I took a red fruit out of inventory, looked it over, and bit in. Juice ran down my chin, the flavor exquisite, sweeter and finer than anything I'd ever tasted, the best fruit of my life. Once I'd swallowed the last of it, a warm current welled up out of my stomach and rolled out to every limb and bone. I'd felt this exact thing once before with an energy fruit, so I didn't panic, just immediately launched back into the Mystic Void Blade technique, again and again. By the time the warm current finally dissipated, the sun was nearly straight overhead, and I was drenched and ravenous, my stomach burning and rumbling at once. The hunger was maddening enough that I didn't bother washing up, just bolted to the kitchen, found yesterday's leftover roast, and gulped it down in a few bites. It took the edge off, but not the whole thing, so I worked through 2 portions of dry rations until I was about 70% full. The more I practiced this blade technique, the bigger my appetite swelled, and dry rations clearly weren't going to cut it. I needed meat, premium meat or better. I glanced at the cabinet where 3 premium steaks still sat. Remembering the chat channel claimed that eating them could raise your physique, I figured I'd roast one that night and find out, though right now I cared a good deal more about whether it filled me than whether it buffed me. Fed and refreshed, I finally had the focus to deal with myself, since the morning's cultivation had soaked my clothes through several times over, and they reeked. I couldn't stand it another minute, so I decided to list the small round shields and take a bath. In the workshop, I put all 300 shields I'd made the day before up for sale, still pricing each at 20 wood, 16 stone 4 iron blocks, or 1 glass, and I split the listing into 4 separate orders of 100, 100, 80, and 20. After that, I knocked together 5 wooden barrels, slid them into inventory beside the one I already had, pulled on my rattan armor, took the tang sword, and climbed the fence. The walk to the river went smoothly, no danger anywhere along it. My shelter sat fairly secluded with thin vegetation around it, and the lush grasslands and forests lay to the south, which was where the herbivores liked to graze, and where the carnivores followed. When I reached the river, I found it brimming with life now, a few small fish flashing past in the current here and there, and I made a mental note to look into a fishing net on the trading channel. I took a wooden bucket out of inventory, drew water, and stood there for a cold shower, since there wasn't another soul for several kilometers, and being exposed didn't cost me a thing. Afterward, I pulled out the rest of the buckets, filled them one by one, packed them all back into inventory, and hurried home. Back at the shelter, I spent 3 units of wood on a wooden ladder from the trading channel, climbed onto the roof, and emptied the buckets into the rooftop water tank. It took 4 round trips to fill it, and I looked at the brimming tank with real satisfaction, knowing I wouldn't run dry for a good while. With the water handled, I opened my personal trading channel to check on sales, and a wall of information flashed past, mostly purchase requests and completed transactions. Every last small round shield had sold. Weapons, armor, and food were the hot commodities right now, snapped up the instant they hit the market, so I never had to sweat moving them. The harvest came back as 2,000 wood, 1,600 stone, 320 iron blocks, and 20 glass. Riding the high of a bumper crop, I ran to the workshop and queued up 450 more small round shields. I wanted to milk the current window of fat margins to stockpile materials and push my shelter to level 3. As fast as I could, my basic materials were already enough for the upgrade. What I lacked were 2 blueprints. The resource building was no great worry since some survivors had already laid eyes on one, but the altar blueprint was the real wall, because not a single survivor had ever seen one. The alliances had posted enormous bounties for it in the chat channel, and supposedly nobody had ever claimed one, though it was just as possible somebody had and was sitting on it quietly rather than announcing it to the world. Pulling my thoughts back, the priority in front of me was still food reserves. Meat above all. I tidied up and climbed out the fence gate, planning to search the old thicket that afternoon and hunt anything small I crossed. Half a day burned away fast. The sun sank, and in the distance I walked toward the shelter with my face blank, climbed nimbly back inside, and felt my strung-tight nerves finally slacken, though my expression stayed grim. I sat down at the wooden table and muttered to myself that no wonder there were so few meat orders on the channel. I'd assumed everyone was hoarding it for themselves, but it turned out hunting in the wild was just this brutal. A whole afternoon and I'd found no treasure chests and bagged nothing, having badly underestimated how cunning wild animals were. I'd run into plenty of prey out there, but the small ones were wired tight, sensing me the instant I raised the crossbow and vanishing into the grass and brush before I could line up a shot. After enough of that, I'd switch to hunting materials and chests instead, and even then my luck had been miserable. Not one chest the whole afternoon. I composed myself, breathed out slow, and took careful stock of where I'd gone wrong. I'd been a shut-in before all this, rarely out the door, never once near hunting or combat, and the easy wins in fat trade halls of the last few days had quietly puffed me up into thinking survival in the shoe world was simple. Now reality had slapped that out of me. Today was the alarm bell, proof the shoe world was nothing as simple as I'd let myself believe, that this was no game where I could click a mouse a few times and watch materials pile up. Once the dust settled, the failure actually did me a favor, forcing me to take my own measure again. It would take entering the Lord stage before I learned to prepare thoroughly for every exploration and conquest, and that habit would quietly spare me a great many losses down the line. Calmer now, I found a piece of charcoal and started writing and sketching on a living room wall, mapping out everything that had to get done in the short term. First, food. I had to lock down enough to carry me through the acid rain trial. Second, clothing. The weather was turning. My summer quick-dry clothes were already going to tatters, and I needed warm gear, though the winter clothing on the channel was priced at an absurd 9,999 wood, which was less a price than a polite refusal to sell. Third, Water. I wasn't short right now. The river ran clear and was safe once heated and boiled, but I worried that a long acid rain might foul it, so I'd haul in extra and store it indoors over the next couple of days. Lesser things like building up my strength could go step by step and couldn't be rushed. Looking at the list, my goals were sharp and clear at last, and I wasn't fumbling in the dark anymore. While I was sketching out my plans on the wall, Soil was tallying up her own day, and hers had gone far better than mine. She'd pulled in 150 units of cotton and turned up a bronze treasure chest besides, and cracking it open had given her a portion of food, a pair of fine boots of speed that boosted movement, and a blueprint. Buzzing with the win, she wanted someone to share it with, and one person popped straight into her head. My private messages lit up while I was tidying the barbecue grill. Soil told me she had good news and bad news, and asked which I wanted first. In my experience, she always spoke blunt and short. Blunt enough that I sometimes forgot she was a woman at all, so I figured she'd stumbled into something good. Otherwise, why so cheerful? I played along and told her to give me the bad news first, bitter before sweet. She turned impatient and said the bad news was she couldn't trade me cotton anymore, then paused, waiting for me to bite before she'd spill the rest. Honestly, I didn't think that was bad news in the slightest. Torches sat fixed at 3 wood on the channel, and my time was better spent on small round shields than on torches anyway, so I let her stew a moment longer, teasing her before I finally asked what the good news was. Soil had gone so long without a reply that she'd half convinced herself I was genuinely angry, and she was wondering whether she needed to explain herself when my question finally landed. She fired back at once that this was the good news, and sent me an item description. It was a fine cotton clothes blueprint, gear that ran warmer than ordinary cloth and was a must for winter, calling for 5 cotton or fur and 2 cloth or beast hide per set. This time I was genuinely floored. Just as I was nodding off, someone had handed me a pillow, and Soil really was my lucky star. I told her this wasn't just good news, it was an outright windfall, since winter clothes were the exact thing I'd been fretting over. Her eyes curved up in delight, proof of the old line that sharing joy doubles it. I congratulated her and envied her luck openly. After that, the two of us sat down and worked out how to squeeze the most from the blueprint. I mostly just offered advice, since it wasn't mine and I couldn't supply the raw materials. So this particular profit was never going to land in my hands. We settled on riding the high price of winter gear by trickling out a small quantity at a time. The scarcity play to pull in a flood of resources, then turning those resources around to buy up beast hide, cloth, and fur in bulk and stockpile them to sell once the cold really bit. Soil's near-term job was to harvest all the cotton around her shelter before the acid rain trial and stitch up a small batch of clothes to trade for basics. Before we wrapped, she traded me 2 sets of cotton clothes outright and messaged that a friend shouldn't refuse, so I couldn't very well turn her down. I looked at the cotton clothes on the table and sighed that more friends meant more roads, that I really did need to make more of them. Then I sprinkled a pinch of salt over the fine steak, opened my private messages, found Wang Jihyun, and realized I'd just had a good idea. I asked Wang Jihyun if he had a minute, and he came back instantly asking what was up. I told him I knew someone I'd traded with a few times, that she'd struck me as decent and resourceful, and that I wanted to bring her into the group. I gave him a quick rundown of Soil's shelter, leaning on the winter clothing blueprints, and he was his usual straightforward self, saying if I thought she was fine then she was fine, and to send her name so he could fire off an invite. Everyone in the shoe world went by their real name with numbers tacked on for duplicates, so there was no danger of adding the wrong person. I sent her name and number along, messaged Soil about the group, and she gladly took the invitation. I welcomed Soil to the group, and noted her shelter was rich in cotton and forage, then asked everyone to introduce themselves and reach out if they needed anything, keeping my own introduction of her light, figuring a few trades would let them get acquainted on their own. Yu Yang led with his usual welcome, said his resource was iron blocks, told her to call on him if she needed any, and then immediately asked whether she had an ability. I covered my face, because the man was as predictable as the sunrise. After a round of ribbing aimed at Yu Yang, everyone introduced themselves. Soil got the shape of each person, and they all friended one another. Wang Jihyun decided to start the day's exchange early since the whole group was present. He announced he'd picked up a water purifier blueprint that ran on plastic and asked anyone holding plastic not to dump it on the market, but to sell it all to him. Yu Aguk cheered that now they wouldn't have to buy purifiers off the channel and said he'd start watching for plastic. He wasn't wrong to be glad either, since I'd checked the channel before and a water purifier ran 1,000 wood. But the real problem wasn't the price. It was that they were out of stock. Yu Aguk added that he could make beast traps now, that he'd tested them that day and they only caught small animals at middling odds, and offered them at 2 iron blocks each to anyone interested. The rest of us perked up at that, since a trap could pull double duty in hunting, and a low success rate was fine, set enough of them, and even 1 catch was profit. I took 5 to try out, and Yu Aguk told me they'd work better with beast bait, but since he didn't have that blueprint I could just use wild fruit instead. Next, the group traded around some resources, Song Aru picking up several medicinal plant seeds, and Xiao Hu unloading a batch of beast hides that Yu Soil bought wholesale, hiring her to stitch a fine set of winter clothes for everyone. I actually had a backpack blueprint that called for beast hide myself, but the market for backpacks looked thin, so I'd never planned to chase hides for it. What did surprise me was that Xiao Huo could move that many beast hides at all, which meant his ability really had let him drop a lot of animals, though he wasn't selling any meat steaks, which told me his own meat supply wasn't exactly overflowing either. By the time we finished trading, the steaks in my hand had cooked through, and that first bite confirmed everything the system had promised. The premium roast left ordinary meat in the dust, oily without being greasy, crisp and rich, and after I swallowed, a warm sensation spread through my stomach with a deep, lasting fullness behind it, like there was some quiet magic worked into the food itself. Where ordinary roast would have needed 2 full-size steaks to fill me, this one left me plainly satisfied. I moved around the open ground and felt the warm current run from my stomach through the rest of me, and I could even feel a faint bump in my strength. My physique sat at 6 already, above the average grown adult, so anyone with weaker fitness would feel it hit even harder. So this was how most people raised their physique, with the super energy fruits being far too rare to count on. If I hadn't had the red fruit, I'd have needed premium steaks, or better just to cultivate the mystic void blade technique. The shoe world wanted us to fight. That was the whole shape of it. Scavenging only kept you alive, while fighting was what made you strong. I was more and more convinced the place was breeding warriors built to fight under brutal conditions, and if that was right, then raw personal strength was about to matter enormously, and a lot of the low rungs in those survivor alliances were probably going to get culled down the line. One premium steak had me thinking hard, and I quietly resolved to put cultivation and hunting first and harden myself as much as I could. With the charcoal still hot, I roasted the other 2 premium steaks for tomorrow, deciding I'd fold one into every meal from here on. Once the steaks were stowed in the kitchen, I tidied up and remembered the Goo King Bee box should have finished evolving its horned bee queen by now. I picked the box up from the living room with some anticipation, and sure enough, it signaled a new queen had been produced. The panel named her a horned bee queen, rank 1, boss quality, carrying paralytic venom and a 60% boost to swarm control. An ordinary horned bee that had clawed her way up through combat and taken a level from the box to become a queen. The system also laid out the quality ladder for wild creatures, running ordinary, elite, boss, hero, lord, with the first 4 lines coming with 0 to 3 attributes or skills, and lord creatures having no cap at all. Right after that, the box asked me to set the swarm's growth direction, and there were 3 roads. Reconnaissance sharpened the swarm's scouting, and stealth and let them grasp my intentions to a degree. Combat did what it said on the tin, pushing numbers, venom, and size. Logistics leaned the swarm toward honey collection, producing honey with different attributes, some of which granted abilities, and some of which even permanently raised stats. The choice wasn't binding forever, since a rank 2 box could hold 3 queens at once, and each could pick her own road. And only after all 3 were locked would changing a swarm's direction mean killing the queen and evolving a fresh one. What I needed most right now were scouts to find resources and beasts, so I chose reconnaissance without hesitation, since flying solo my search efficiency was simply too low. A scout-built swarm wasn't helpless either, the horned bee's natural paralytic venom still in place, just with future growth bending toward exploration and stealth. The box lid swung open on its own, and a horned bee the size of an adult thumb edged out, spotted me, flapped over to land on my shoulder, and started scanning the room warily. This was the queen. I studied her, 2 or 3 times the size of an ordinary horned bee, the 3 stingers at her tail glinting cold, and far longer than the common kind, her venom potent enough that no rank 0 beast could shrug it off. Around 1,000 elite horned bees filled the box besides her troops. Following the prompt, I picked a horned bee model out of the box, a thing about the size of a glass bead, which was the bee swarm controller. Holding it let me push my thoughts to the queen, who relayed them to the swarm, and through it I could vaguely read back what the swarm meant in return. I ordered the queen to lead the swarm in guarding and foraging around the shelter, testing the controller, and she took the swarm out and started patrolling at once. Tomorrow I'd take them hunting. I dropped the bee swarm controller into inventory and noticed it was nearly full. The more kinds of gear I had to haul out the door, the less 10 slots managed, so I figured I'd dig out the backpack blueprint I'd picked up and see if it bought me some room, until I learned whether inventory could be expanded later. No sooner thought than done. I fetched the blueprint and materials, fed the blueprint into the workbench where it dissolved into white light and surfaced the backpack option above the crafting list, and read off the requirements: 1 beast hide and 2 rope. I had 2 beast hides but no rope, so I opened the channel to buy some, and found rope was its own sprawling category: paracord and metal rope, and hemp and cotton and polyester. Some were survivor made like hemp and cotton, others came out of treasure chests like paracord and metal rope, hemp being cheapest at 1 wood per unit and metal rope dearest with prices all over the map. I didn't need anything fancy, ordinary hemp or cotton would do, so I tried 2 units of cotton rope for 8 wood, half certain the workbench wouldn't even recognize a backpack built from metal cable. I set the cotton rope and beast hide down at the workbench, the hide being the common quality leopard skin I'd taken the day novice protection ended, and confirmed the synthesis. A minute later, out came a common backpack, a double-shoulder leather thing patterned in leopard print, and about the size of a school bag. On Blue Star, that genuine leather would have fetched a fortune, but in the shoe world, it all came down to attributes. The panel called it crudely made with room for 2 cubic meters of items, no living creatures allowed, and warned that the volume might be small but the weight wouldn't drop. I dropped the stone axe in to test it and watched anything that touched the mouth shrink down automatically, so the bag didn't actually hold 2 cubic meters of space inside. It held 2 cubic meters of objects by crushing their volume. 2 cubic meters was the ceiling. Nothing more would fit, and the weight stayed put, so a full bag of stone would still be more than I could lift. I sent the backpack stats to the group for their read, and they all agreed it was useful for going out. No good for bulk basics like wood and stone, but solid for small light gear, which would free up some inventory. Once they heard I could make them, they all placed orders, since every survivor's inventory ran short, and I took the requests without charging a handling fee, only asking them to bring their own materials. Their analysis shifted my read a little, the backpack being more useful than I'd written it off as, though I still wasn't about to mass produce it as a commodity. The main material was beast hide, and I had none in stock and no intention of grinding the channel for hides and rope. And besides, small round shields were still printing money, and it wasn't time to change my lead product. Since I'd misjudged the backpack, I fed the reclining chair blueprint I'd grabbed yesterday into the workbench too, and spent 2 casual units of wood on one. Out came a solid reddish-brown wood recliner, identical to the ones back on Blue Star. No surprise effects on its panel, just an ordinary chair. I dragged it to the living room, lay back, and pulled up the chat channel, and the comfortable old feeling of scrolling my phone at home washed right over me. The description hadn't lied. Lying on the thing really did let you unwind. The channel was as rowdy as ever in the evening. One survivor crowed about a silly rabbit that had bolted straight into a tree out of fright. Photo of rabbit meat attached. Another cooed about bunnies being too cute to eat. A third offered to swap half a rabbit for instant noodles, and a fourth waved them all off. With a roasted lamb, between the clowns there were genuine experience shares too. One survivor laid out a careful theory on the gathering skill, that using it on prey made the whole carcass vanish and handed you meat cuts, hides, fangs, and fur of varying quality. He'd run a control test, skinning and butchering a beast by hand, and appraising the parts, finding the system would rate them but only as common quality. Then using gathering on the leftover bones and organs to get a unit of fine bones, pure bone with no scrap of meat. His read was that gathering condensed essence and raised quality, that if you just wanted meat you should butcher by hand for the larger yield, but if you wanted fine cuts and materials you had to use the skill. The channel lit up in amazement that they had a researcher among the clowns, and after Ji Yang thanked him for sharing and called it useful for the many survivors short on food, the comments fell into a unified line of thanks. I sighed too, since the shoe world had a way of blurring the line between game and reality, and I'd always gathered straight away without ever thinking to experiment. Still, it wasn't much use to me because I'd already settled on eating fine cuts or better, strength first. I trusted my read on this place. The shoe world needed warriors. After scrolling the channel a good while longer and turning up nothing else interesting, I closed the system, got up and went to the warehouse for my synthesis materials, since a bedtime synthesis was a fixed routine now. I told myself I hoped to pull something good tonight and started with a casual warm-up to heat the furnace. I'd use a crossbow bolt as the main material, with a warm stone as auxiliary, hoping for a burning arrow. And after testing ratios I found wood plus coal as auxiliary gave the best success rate, though the mutation rate climbed high too, probably because the bolt and the warm stone were so different in nature. Higher uncertainty just made the blind box more fun. I summoned the furnace, fed it 1 crossbow bolt as the main material with 5 wood, 1 warm stone, and 1 coal as auxiliary, and the panel offered 80% success against a steep 60% mutation. I stared at it, wondering whether odds that lopsided could still kick out something useful, and confirmed. As my mental energy flowed in, the furnace lit slowly with the blue glow, and as it faded a redstone-like object dropped into my hand. I probed it. An explosive stone, tier 0, fine quality, its explosion radius boosted 50%, the panel calling it a stone packed with high-intensity energy that detonated on impact. The normal 1 meter blast widened by the fine grade to 1.5 meters. My face went a little pale, and I shoved the thing into inventory fast, because the instant I'd read the words extremely prone to explosion, I'd nearly flinched and flung it across the room. Watching it sit there quiet, I let out a breath and felt the joy seep back in. Wasn't this just a Xuanhuan-flavored grenade? I figured I'd run the exact same materials again to see if I'd get the same result, and pulled out an identical set, confirming without hesitation. A flash of blue, and it succeeded again. Another red stone, this one landing on the table. I didn't reach for it, just probed it from a distance. A burst flash stone, tier 0, fine quality, this one carrying exorcism +1. The panel describing the same impact detonation but bursting into a dazzling light. This time I'd made a flashbang, but what on earth did exorcism mean? Were there ghosts in the shoe world? The thought of every ghost and monster out of myth sent a chill down my spine, and I muttered to myself to believe in materialism and science. That exorcism in the description had better not mean what people usually meant by it. though with transmigration already on the table, ghosts weren't exactly off it. I put the burst flash stone away and dug out the rattan armor I usually wore, planning a defensive piece next. I wasn't hurting for weapons, but my defense came down to a serpent skin shield and rattan armor, and the shield was only common quality, sure to fall short sometime. I'd try to strengthen the rattan armor with synthesis to make hunting safer, setting it as the main material with 2 black iron wood and 2 iron blocks for their good defense, plus 3 warm stones in the hope of getting a warming property tacked on. Testing put the rate at a respectable 75%, and while all wood pushed it to 95, all wood would barely improve the armor at all, so I figured a small improvement wasn't worth it, and I'd rather gamble. The panel reads 75% success against 40% mutation, and I confirmed and fed in my mental energy, without flinching. The furnace began drawing on me, and after this many syntheses I had a feel for it. The mental energy spent tied to the quality of a successful result, a fine or below item costing 1 point and a rare item costing 2. With nothing higher in my experience yet. This one pulled a single point, which left me wondering whether it would land common or fine, and when the blue light flashed I breathed easier and read it as fine, not bad at all. But when the light died, the item on the table left me a little lost. It looked like an oval gem about the size of a pigeon's egg, entirely blood red, faintly glowing, genuinely pretty. I didn't touch it in case it was another explosive stone. My luck all day had been strange, every synthesis a surprise, but with 2 already behind me I wasn't rattled, and I calmly appraised it. A fire poison thorn vine seed, rank 1. Fine quality, with a 30% growth speed bonus, the panel calling it a rare transcendent plant seed and telling me to drip blood on it to claim ownership before planting. A transcendent plant seed. I picked it up and set it on my palm, warm to the touch, crystal clear on closer look, more a fiery red gem than a seed. Did transcendent plants come with superpowers? Were they the legendary spirit plants? I couldn't tell anything from staring, I'd only know once it grew. My rattan armor had turned into a seed, so not only was the armor not reinforced, I was now a piece short. I scratched at that for a second but didn't complain, because the seed was plainly precious, and rattan armor was just rattan armor, easily traded for another from Songaru tomorrow. I decided to keep going, this time using a useless raincoat as the main material, with lynx hide, 2 black iron wood, and 2 ice crystals as auxiliary, hoping to maybe synthesize a piece of clothing type armor. The panel offered 70% success against 50% mutation, and I told myself even a coin flip mutation didn't matter, since losing these materials was nothing as long as the synthesis succeeded, and any success was profit. I hesitated a beat, then confirmed, calm and not really expecting armor, given how unrelated everything was and how high the mutation odds ran. The blue light faded and a set of clothes lay on the table. I examined them curiously. A cat pattern combat suit, tier 0, fine quality, the attribute water repellent, the panel cheerfully calling it a trendy combat suit whose spotted cat pattern made it a fashion favorite. A pity about that attribute. I unfolded the suit with a look of distaste. It was a one-piece thing, faintly Spider-Man in cut, and when I pulled hard the material held strong, the whole thing gray and covered in lynx-like spots, so that wearing it I could fully cosplay as a lynx. Or rather lynx man. Mockable looks aside, the attribute was actually good. Water repellent meant the suit shrugged off mud and blood, and never got wet or filthy, basically a built-in cleaning spell. The real question was whether it could repel acid rain, because if it could, the suit's value would jump, and I'd even be able to head out in the rain. That single thought turned the silly cat patterns adorable in an instant. By the time I finished the suit, my mental energy had bottomed out, so I had to call it there and put the leftover materials back in the warehouse. The Shoe World nights were dead quiet. I'd been here 5 days and had mostly adapted to living alone and surviving, but the loneliness still pressed in after dark. And beyond the daily chatter on the channel, I planned to slowly improve my quality of life to take the edge off it. Tonight, a hot bath. Tomorrow, new clothes. The small round shields were still in production over in the tool room, and I couldn't sleep until they finished. And I'd listed them, because listing in the morning instead would burn half a day, and half a day could make a great many more shields. I took out charcoal, poured river water from a bucket into the kitchen pot, lit the stove, and got the bath water going. While it heated, I spent 5 wood on a single bathtub from the channel, and skimming the comments I found bathtubs sold briskly. Plenty of survivors buying them, women especially. I extracted the tub, hauled it slowly to the bathroom, then slapped my forehead, because low mental energy was apparently dulling my wits too, and I should have just extracted it inside the bathroom to start. After grumbling at myself, I rushed back to watch the water, and once it boiled, I ladled it into the wooden bucket, dumped that into the tub, and topped it with cold water from the tank until it sat around 42 degrees. Sinking into the bath, I felt my body slowly let go, and my mind finally unclench. The last few days had been crushing, more than one brush with death in there, and if I hadn't lived alone since childhood and learned to regulate myself, my head would have come apart long ago. Drowsy in the warm water, I forced myself awake and carefully scrubbed off the grime, lamenting the lack of soap or shampoo. I'd seen soap on the channel priced at 300 iron blocks. A flat robbery I had no intention of falling for. Once I was clean, I felt pounds lighter, and I tossed the ruined quick-dry clothes into the tool room. Done wearing them, figuring I'd render them down into raw material someday. Pulling on the cat pattern suit I'd been mocking, the stickiness was gone and the water repellent kept it breathable, downright refreshing. It would be a mistake to underestimate a simple bath, because among survivors no more than half could even manage one, and for most it was a luxury. Ordinary survivors broke their backs all day chopping wood, breaking stone, and mining, came home spent with only enough harvest to scrape by, then had to haggle with their neighbors for a sliver of supplies, leaving their minds as worn as their bodies. Bone tired and broke, they couldn't spare the means to heat bath water, and at best, scooped a bucket for a quick rinse. My luck was that I could sell rare items and never sweat the basics, so the things I cared about now, fine quality meat and practicing knife work, were luxuries an ordinary survivor couldn't even afford to think about. After I emptied the bath, the shields had finished, so I went to the tool room and split the 450 of them into 4 orders as usual. 150 at 20 wood, 100 at 16 stone, 150 at 4 iron blocks, and 50 at 1 glass each. Listing done, I noticed Wang Ro had sent me a few messages, the gist being a good harvest that day plus some fishing around for information on the Bloodfiend Alliance. I skimmed them, found nothing useful, tossed back a few words, and closed the box. Then I used the controller to set the Hornbee Queen on night watch, went back to my bedroom, shut my eyes, and dropped fast into a deep sleep. Tomorrow, I'd hunt again. Shoe World, Day 6, weather light fog clearing to sun, temperature 8 to 21 degrees, with a countdown of 4 days to the acid rain trial and a note for all survivors to prepare as soon as possible. I woke before dawn and caught the new weather reminder right away, a function I liked, though I thought it'd be even better as a full forecast. First thing, I opened the channel to check the shields, skipped the screen of trade notices, and saw last night's whole batch had sold out, so I pulled the harvested resources back with a satisfied face. A pleasant surprise to start the day, and a sign the rest of it would be loaded with rewards. After hyping myself up, I sent Songmaru a trade request, wood for a set of rattan armor, since I'd burned my old set in synthesis and didn't feel safe heading out to hunt without it. She didn't answer right off, probably still asleep, but I wasn't in a rush, planning to cultivate in the morning and stay in, so closing the trade before noon would be fine. After a quick wash, I had bread, an apple, and a glass of water for breakfast. And while I ate, I tallied my basics. 4,250 wood, 3,350 stone, 603 iron blocks, and a thinner 73 glass. Then I queued up 600 shields at the workbench, since time was money. Stepping out, the weather matched the system's read exactly, a faint mist drifting with visibility around 200 meters. In my cat pattern suit, I came into the courtyard, warmed up, swallowed a red fruit, and officially began the day's cultivation. It was monotonous work, but as the red fruit took hold, I sank fully into it. The mystic void blade technique growing smoother and smoother in my hands, every move grander and stronger. The blade ran faster and faster, then the momentum paused mid-stroke and broke loose again, and anyone watching would have felt the Tang sword turn suddenly nimble, the technique shedding its old stiffness. When I finished the full set and stood with the blade sheathed, I pulled up my attribute panel and read that the mystic void blade technique had crossed into mastery, sitting at 2%. Where I'd merely followed the instructions before, I'd now quietly reshaped some of the moves, adjusting force and angle to suit myself. Feeling the red fruit's warm current still in me, I didn't stop just because the technique had advanced, but kept on until its energy was fully absorbed and the fatigue and hunger washed over me. By then it was nearing noon, the mist long gone, the warm sun lying comfortably across me, comfortable enough that if I weren't a survivor I'd have hauled out a lounge chair for a good nap. Back in the kitchen, I reheated yesterday's premium steak and brewed a bag of braised beef noodles with hot water, since a technique breakthrough earned me something good. Savoring the steak, I took out the fire poison thorn vine seed from yesterday, deciding I needed to find a spot in the courtyard to plant it, and wondering how long it would take to grow. I'd never even seen a transcendent seed, let alone planted one, and it didn't come with instructions, so I muttered to myself, asking whether I just buried it in the ground, like an ordinary one. I didn't know if transcendent plants had special needs, but I did remember the part about dripping blood to claim ownership first, so I grazed my finger across the Tang sword's edge, and let a drop fall and seep slowly into the seed. The moment the blood soaked in, surprise hit me, because I felt a faint connection form, a vague sense of the seed's needs, that it wanted to go into the soil and that it needed water. Suddenly, I understood why the shoe world hadn't bothered with planting instructions. Transcendent plants could vaguely express their feelings. I'd heard some plants could sense human emotion, but never one that could express its own, and certainly nothing this close to conscious communication. I didn't dawdle, digging a small pit about 5 centimeters deep beside the fence gate, setting the seed in, covering it with soil, and watering until the vine sent back a feeling of satisfaction. In my read, it was easy to care for. 2 or 3 days to sprout. Nothing required in between but keeping the ground moist. It was getting late, so after planting, I got ready to head out and gather supplies as planned. I pulled on the fresh rattan armor I'd just traded from Song Aru, slid the Gyu King Bee box into the backpack, since it could still raise 2 more queens and I meant to look for suitable bee swarms along the way, then climbed the fence and headed east to the river, planning to work south along it this time. Animals wouldn't be scarce by the water, since they'd come to drink. I took out the controller and ordered the queen on my shoulder to send the swarm ahead to scout for beasts and report any she found right away, since the swarm might struggle to find treasure chests, but finding game would be simple. The queen took my command, drew a figure 8 in the air in front of me like a salute, then split the swarm in 2, the larger part fanning out to hunt for animals and resources, and the smaller part scattering close to guard the 2 of us. I'd walked south along the river barely any time before. Several horned bees came back and hovered in front of me, flying the same direction over and over to point me at something. Results already? My face brightened and I followed fast, and not far off I saw a cluster of bees gathered around something they seemed to have surrounded. What kind of animal was that small? Looking at the tiny ring the bees had formed, I half figured it was a false alarm, normal enough on the swarm's first job. But when I reached them and saw the figure trembling in the bee's grip, body entirely white, curled into a fist-sized fluffy ball, it turned out to be a little white. Compared to the horned bees, the thing did technically count as a giant beast. A little speechless, I stepped forward anyway, waved the swarm off, and gently pinched the creature up between thumb and forefinger. I set it on my palm, and just as I went to study it, it suddenly flopped onto its back as though scared to death. Dead already. Such a coward. Let's see if a sting brings it back. I reached to summon a few bees for a little acupuncture, and the little white jolted, flipped over, curled into a cotton ball, and trembled in pure terror. I knew it was faking. I couldn't help laughing at the thing's resurrection, since it was clearly clever and clearly funny, and I fixed my eyes on it to read its stats. A mutated little white. Tier 0, elite quality, attribute good luck, the panel saying it was a pet with extraordinary luck whose ancient bloodline was beginning to awaken under the Shoe World's rules. An elite monster, no less. I stared at it, half stunned, thinking this might be the most useless elite I'd ever see. But the good luck attribute was genuinely rare, and I found myself eager to find out whether it could pass that luck to its owner as a pet, because I wouldn't say no to some luck myself. I forced the corners of my mouth into what I believed was a friendly smile, and told the little creature that finding it meant we were fated. I said surviving this broken world was hard, but that from now on it would follow me and I'd keep it safe as its owner, and that since it was all white, I'd call it Little White. Whether it understood I couldn't say, probably not, because the instant it saw my full set of bared white teeth, it fainted clean away from fright. I was a little speechless, given how kind I was being. I tucked it into the pocket of my combat suit, since I had no time now and would build a relationship later. Right then, several horned bees flew back, having found something again, and I followed them north about a kilometer, until I spotted my prey in the distance. This time something large. 3 adult zebras by the river around 200 meters off. 2 had their backs to me drinking while the 3rd stood guard facing away from the water. Since I was to their northwest and had dropped flat immediately, they hadn't caught me yet, but the moment I stood and approached it was only a matter of time. I couldn't close the gap now. Any big movement would give me away. The whole area was open grassland with a clear line of sight, so standing might get me spotted on the spot, while crawling would rustle the grass and alert the sentry, and my speed could never run a zebra down anyway. A direct attack was out too, the distance well past the ice pattern repeating crossbow's range, so I had to find a way to close it. As I turned the problem over, my eye caught my own shoulder and lit up. I had an idea. I held the controller and gave the queen her orders to swing wide around the zebras and use the swarm to drive them my way. Her little head bobbed, taking my meaning, and she lifted off my shoulder and led the swarm around to the zebras north. From a distance, I watched the swarm reach position with the zebras barely reacting, since the bees were small and the zebras weren't afraid of a few insects. Once the swarm was set, I focused on the controller and sent them charging the zebra drinking by the river. As they closed, that zebra jerked its head up, stared at the swarm, and began backing away, but the bees only accelerated straight at its face, several landing near its nose and driving their stingers in without pause. My swarm, raised in the Gyu King Bee box, ran far past ordinary horned bees in venom and stinger hardness, and the stings hit the zebra with excruciating pain. It reared and neighed, hooves kicking wild, and bolted from the swarm in my direction, the other 2 falling in uneasily behind the leader and running too. The queen led the swarm into an arc, boxing the panicked zebras on 3 sides and leaving the 4th open, herding all 3 straight at me. The frightened things ran terrifyingly fast, crossing into the crossbow's range within seconds, and I watched them come calmly and triggered the ice arrow built into the weapon, a deep blue light spilling off the body. My face went hard and my eyes darkened as I raised it, aimed at the 2 intact zebras out front, and pulled the trigger, reloading with my offhand and firing again. 2 arrows trailing a blue chill flew out and struck the lead pair at once, frost flashing across their hides and the ice arrows stalling their sprint. With their limbs frozen stiff and their speed gutted, I rose fast and worked the trigger without pause, pumping arrows into their heads. The front zebra took several, its 4 legs buckling until it knelt to the ground, and the second went down right behind it, head riddled with shafts, dropping 10 meters from me. With the leaders handled, I turned to the last one, still ringed by the swarm and screaming in terror, fear scattering its sense of direction while the paralytic venom went to work inside it and stiffened its movements. I stepped in, scattered the swarm, put 2 arrows into the wretched thing to empty the magazine, and ended its fear and its suffering at once. What a haul, I beamed, because this really was 3 adult zebras taken down with almost no effort. The only cost a handful of arrows. Looking down at the one at my feet, the swarm's combat power genuinely surprised me, and I figured the win owed most to them. Their fighting really was good, only their numbers a bit thin, so I'd send the queen out to recruit soldiers once I got back. She could go into the wild, draw hornets into the hive, and train them into the swarm, and this success pushed me to build the swarm up and grow the team, especially since the fight had cost more than 10 scout bees, and without fresh recruits the queen would soon have no bees to command. I ran the gathering skill across all 3 zebras, which gave me 24 blue steaks, 3 blue animal hides, and 3 blue bones. Bones, what were these for? Soup. I took one out and looked it over. Genuinely a bone, no flesh or blood, smooth and shiny. I tossed the hides and bones into the backpack, the steaks into inventory, then bent for the wooden treasure chest that had dropped and cracked it open without ceremony, pulling out a set of cotton pajamas, a saddle and rein set, and a bottle of vitamins. The pajamas weighed maybe 2 kilograms, very good quality. A 2-piece gray men's set sized exactly to my usual clothes, the system being humane enough to refresh clothing to fit just right. Cotton pajamas were hard currency now, the shelter already faintly cold at night, and winter clearly closing in on the shoe world, with every warm supply on the channel climbing in price as people wised up. I stowed the pajamas and picked up the vitamins, a bottle of 100 mixed tablets, basic B and C according to the prompt. In the shoe world, food and drink were a daily problem, and few people bothered supplementing vitamins, the better off ones just eating some wild fruit, and even I, surviving well by comparison, hadn't touched a vegetable in days. Only a few apples, never mind the survivors hovering at the subsistence line. I set the vitamins away with some care, then picked up the last item with a touch of resignation, an equipment set. A saddle and rein set, tier 0, ordinary quality. The panel equipping that clothes make the man and a saddle makes the horse. That this was horse fashion, but I'd need a horse first. Fine stitching, excellent work, superior materials, and entirely useless to me since I had no horse. Just one more deadweight piece of gear, so I didn't look closer and chucked the saddle into the backpack. After counting my gains, I cleaned up the battlefield fast, found 4 mostly intact arrows on the ground, pulled 11 more from the backpack, and loaded the whole lot into the magazine. That left only 2 arrows in the bag, one of them the fang armor-piercing arrow I'd synthesized, so I muttered that arrows were running short and I'd have to make more back home. With things tidied, I sent the swarm out to scout again, since it was still early and I had stamina to spare and meant to keep searching. An hour later, the swarm had turned up no new resource points, so after a quick think, I redirected them toward the thicket to the east. During the search, I spotted plenty of animal traces, and where the rabbit and bird tracks ran obvious, I set down my 5 beast traps. I knew next to nothing about trapping, so I fell back on the crude method of planting traps where the footprints clustered, and baiting them with the wild fruit I'd gathered earlier, which had started to dehydrate, though the apples from the chest were still fresh. I set the last trap under a small tree at the thicket's edge, backed off clearing my tracks, and just as I went to find a place to rest, several horned bees flew over. A discovery. A smile crossed my face, and as more bees arrived dancing in front of me, they'd found a second prey too. 2 locations at once. The bees had handed me 2 pieces of good news in a row, and I stood up surprised, brushed the dirt off my backside, and followed them into the jungle. The combat suit I'd synthesized was genuinely good. I thought as I moved through the dense growth, not just water repellent but well armored, branches scraping across it without leaving a single mark. I wandered the jungle a long while, taking detour after detour, before I reached the first resource point the swarm had found. The area was choked with bushes, easy for the bees to fly over, but a wall for me. So I'd either hack a path through or take the long way around. After half a day of winding through, I finally saw it. A gigantic beehive with a radius near half a meter, bees streaming in and out even from a distance. My mouth curved up, because this swarm was perfect for raising the box's second queen. The panel called them mutated Chinese honeybees, tier 0, ordinary quality. A diligent species whose queen's mutation had sharpened their nest building, lengthened their collection time, and let them produce higher quality honey. A perfect logistics species, and I told the queen most of this would be on her shortly. I surveyed the huge hive from a distance, unslung the backpack, took out the box, and dropped in the 500 grams of honey I'd saved earlier as bait, then cinched the cuffs and pant legs of my combat suit tight, betting the bee stingers couldn't pierce it. Under the swarm's protection, I meant to set the box down not far from the main hive. As I edged closer, the honeybees outside spotted me at once and reacted like they'd met a mortal enemy, some surging forward to attack. I didn't stop, only quickened my pace, strode in, set the box down, lit its drawing characteristic with mental energy, then turned and ran. Just as I'd expected, the honeybees couldn't pierce the suit. My head was shielded by my own swarm, and most of the honeybees died to the surrounding horned bees before they ever reached me. Their combat power far too far below a box-bred horned bees. I broke free of them with only 2 bumps swelling on the back of my hand. The honeybee stingers, thankfully, venomless, just searingly painful. Sucking air through my teeth against the sting, I watched from a distance as the box's characteristic kicked in, and the surrounding bees, drawn helplessly to the honey inside like drunks to fine wine, flew dizzily into it, one after another. The box was a bottomless pit, pulling them in endlessly, and I even saw bees returning to their own hive veer off mid-flight to dive into the box instead. I stood off and watched a full half hour, until every swarm outside but the bees within the hive itself had funneled into the box. With almost nothing left outside, I moved at once, holding the controller and ordering the queen to lead her swarm into the hive and kill its queen. My horned bees were already braced, and the rank 1 queen led 1,000 elites straight in. I didn't wait long before she led them back out carrying a plump white grub, the honeybee queen taken alive. Seeing my swarm with the grub, the honeybees inside came boiling out as though their camp had blown open, bent on rescuing her, and I quickly ordered my swarm to turn and fly for the box. They closed on it fast and, on my command, killed the honeybee queen right beside the hive. The swarm trailing them, suddenly leaderless with their queen dead, broke apart in every direction and got drawn into the box right after. With the job cleanly done, I stepped up light-footed to check the box, finding nearly 100,000 honeybees inside, a dense vast field of them, the goo-rearing mode already triggered on its own. Then I turned and ran the gathering skill over the giant hive beside me, which gave me 12 caddies of blue honey, 1 caddy of blue royal jelly, and 300 blue bee eggs. 3 excellent quality items, and I checked each one. The honey was tier 0, excellent, attribute nourishes mental energy, the panel calling it extremely sweet honey from mutated bees that, taken long-term, permanently raised mental energy and perception. A food that permanently lifted mental energy and perception. I shouted in excitement, because permanent stat items were far too rare, the kind of treasure you could never have too much of, and since my own talent ran on mental energy, the higher mine climbed the stronger my synthesis grew. The royal jelly was tier 0, excellent, with a 30% chance to permanently raise a bee swarm's quality, a rare ingredient the panel praised as rich and never tiring to eat, able on consumption to lift a swarm's grade. I'd heard of royal jelly before, an old acquaintance once swearing by it for the weak and the recovering. Though what that old brother actually chased was a folk rumor that had boosted a man's vigor, which had him hunting wild jelly everywhere. I had no plans to eat my caddy of it, being young and strong and not in need, since I wanted to feed it to the queen instead. The swarm's value was beyond doubt, and the queen's own combat power was fierce, her venomous stingers able to drop most rank 0 creatures instantly, except she had only 3 of them and I'd always been loath to spend 1. What greeted me at the next point was a 200-meter clearing scored all over with giant snake tracks across the bare ground. The vegetation was sparse, only a few scattered weeds, and a giant snake lay coiled silent in the center, seemingly resting, its belly bulging like it had just fed. Its body ran a mix of white and green, the scales interwoven in each the size of an adult's palm, throwing off a metallic sheen, and coiled as it was I couldn't read its full length, though I put it past 10 meters with a head half a meter long alone. I crouched in the bushes and read it from the corner of my eye. A mutated python, tier 0, boss quality, raising its entanglement lethality by 50% and carrying Snake Dash, a skill that flung its whole body out in an instant to close distance and swallow prey. The panel named it a jungle overlord and cold-blooded hunter just shy of advancing to rank 1, with speed wildly out of keeping with its size. I couldn't beat it, not a chance. Cold sweat broke across my forehead the moment I read its stats, because I was honestly frightened. This python was far beyond me, and forget the skill, its sheer size and scales meant my crossbow arrows would barely sink in, scratching it at best. If I couldn't break its scale defense, I'd just be tickling the thing. I didn't hesitate, retreating slow, ready to turn and leave this dangerous place, and what I didn't see was the python sliding its gaze, after I'd turned, toward the very spot I'd been hiding in. I backed off 200 meters carefully before breaking into a run, since even that distance didn't feel safe, and after a fast kilometer I stopped, panting, and released the swarm to find a way out of the brush and search for materials, while I rested and waited. This time took longer, a full hour before the swarm came back, the place sitting far from the jungle's edge. Through the controller I gathered they'd found a way out and turned up a resource point along the route, and I hoped this one wasn't another scare, shaking my head with a wry smile since I was still rattled. The bees only knew a resource when they found one, the question of danger left to me. I set off anyway, following them to the new point, the fastest way out of the jungle besides, and the odds of 2 overlords sitting this close together were low. 10 minutes on, the swarm brought me to a tree only about 3 meters tall, where the scout bee broke off and circled the top, marking the resource there. I looked up and saw nothing but a bird's nest among the branches, and figured at most it held a few eggs, a little let down, but I climbed up nimbly anyway, careful not to fell the tree and break them. The nest sat on a branch 3 meters up, and I could only haul myself to about 2 before the wood wouldn't bear me, so I rose slow and peered in, pleasantly surprised to find not just eggs but a wooden box, a wooden treasure chest. A chest spawning up here, who could ever find it? Grumbling, I took the 3 eggs in the chest, slid down quick without opening it, stowed the eggs and pointed the swarm onward. About 20 minutes later I finally cleared the jungle, glanced at the sun and put it near 4 o'clock with an hour of light left, and quickened my pace to make the shelter before dark. Though by the time I saw it shrouded in fog, it had already gone full dark. Back inside, I set the box at the base of the arrow tower, where 8 square meters of space made a perfect home for the swarm, then had the queen arrange the swarm to forage on its own and guard the shelter, handing her the 300 bee eggs to replenish the ranks. I didn't rest once I was in the stone house, spending 2 wood on a wooden cage from the channel, and dropping Little White still in my pocket inside it. I told the little one this was its home now, and that I'd get it some food. Little White had woken long ago and spent the time trying to escape, but the mountain cat's suit was beyond anything it could chew through, and after a whole afternoon of being jostled along with me, the entire mouse was half dead. I took a wooden bowl from the kitchen, poured it half a bowl of water, and dripped in a few drops of today's fine honey, afraid the creature might die of my handling, and figuring honey water made a fine tonic for it. With Little White settled, I didn't linger, since there was a pile of work left. I stowed the day's haul in the warehouse and kitchen, packed the 600 shields I'd made into inventory from the tool room, then listed them all on the channel, 200 for wood, 200 for iron blocks, 100 for stone, 100 for glass, prices unchanged. Chores done, I lay back in the recliner and casually cracked the wooden chest I brought home, pulling out a 10-kilogram bag of rice, a box of 12 cold medicine tablets for wind chill colds, and a military overcoat, the overcoat a downright divine artifact for warmth though I didn't need it yet. There was also a bronze treasure chest, and those still held good things, so I stared at it eagerly and opened it slow. After a flash of light, 3 orbs of light sat in a box, and I picked one up and crushed it. An underwater breathing potion, rank 1. Fine quality, its duration up 30%. The panel saying that once drunk you could breathe freely underwater for 20 minutes. I knew this one well from games, a single-purpose potion, and after a moment I decided to shelve it in the warehouse, since I wouldn't need it for a while and had no plans to explore the river yet. I crushed the second orb, another potion, a bottle of emerald green this time. A plant growth fluid, tier 0, fine quality. Its effect up an extra 30%, the panel calling it a brew developed by a potion great master to ripen herbs and cut the growth time of any plant below rank 1 by half. The maker had later found, though, that ripening herbs with it cost more than just buying 2 portions of the same herb outright. Plants below rank 1, which was perfect for the fire poison thorn vine, where it would slash the growth time straight by 80%. The potion had come at exactly the right moment. I didn't bother with the last orb, grabbing the potion instead and running to the fire poison thorn vine, where I gently dug the pit open and dripped a single drop onto the seed first. I watched intently as the drop fell, and the seed drank it in, and a piece of information came back through our sensory link. The seed's consciousness still very dim, able only to grasp that it was wanted, the broken signal telling me the growth fluid had a strong effect on it. Relief washed over me, and sensing the vine's craving for the fluid, I slowly poured the whole bottle onto the seed. It burst out in a dazzling blue light, then sprouted and surged as though time had been sped up, throwing out vines that wound around the fence on their own and crept slowly outward along it. I half regretted it, wondering whether I shouldn't have emptied the bottle all at once, whether the seed could even handle that much. I kept running my detection skill on the vine but got only that it was still growing, so I focused my consciousness to sense its emotions, and what came back was happiness and excitement, and only then did I slowly ease up. Apart from the rapid growth, the vine seemed fine, no problems anywhere. I stopped waiting anxiously and went back inside, the system telling me this growth would still take a long while. Once indoors, I saw the leftover orb on the table and remembered I'd never opened it, so I walked over, picked it up, and crushed it. A blueprint, a toilet paper blueprint, common, that could make toilet paper and only toilet paper, calling for 1 wood attribute material. I figured toilet paper would sell well, humble but genuinely useful, since the agony of having no paper out in the wild was a thing the initiated understood all too well. I'd feed it into the workbench first, make 10 units, and hand them to Yu Yang and the others to hear what they thought, since giving survivors toilet paper as a gift ought to go over nicely. The group was already lively when I checked in, Yu Yang and Xiao Ho deep in something. And without scrolling back, I gathered Xiao Ho had hunted a mutated crocodile with his ability, and was showing off the fight while Yu Yang mostly just stewed in envy. Yu Yang had no ability and no cultivation method, no blade technique or breathing art, leaning on beast traps and pricey bows for defense, with no real way to hunt on the offensive, which was the same boat most survivors were in. Seeing them trade useless chatter, I cut in to say I'd gotten something good, and ask if anyone was interested. Yu Yang leapt on it, asking what good thing, whether it boosted strength, demanding a copy, since he badly needed anything that raised his strength. He watched the ability users hunt every day while he could only mine iron, and though his income wasn't bad, he always felt unsafe, wanting to be extraordinary himself. settling for buying high-quality steaks at a premium to nudge his physique up. Xiaohuo chimed in that I should just send it over, that if I thought it was good it had to be good, since he hunted daily, hauled in well, and had grown an aura over the last few days, shedding some of his old greenness. I didn't waste their time and sent the toilet paper's description straight to the group, asking if they thought it had a market. Yu Yang deflated that it wasn't an equipment blueprint, but Wang Jihyun popped up out of nowhere, clearly lurking, declaring it had a huge market and demanding 10 units, saying he'd genuinely had enough these past few days. He came from a wealthy family and had lived in luxury his whole life, and though he had the mindset to accept reality fast and fight to survive, he loathed life in the shoe world deep down, and the sight of toilet paper simply broke him. Xiaohuo cried that equipment couldn't hold a candle to toilet paper and that he wanted some too, that he really needed it, his backside about to crack, and Yue Guk asked for some as well. The two women in the group said nothing and just sent me private trade messages, probably out of embarrassment. I'd thought toilet paper had a market but hadn't expected this, though on reflection it made sense, since everyone in our little group had a specialty, survived comfortably, and had cleared the survival stage to start chasing quality of life. I handed everyone 10 units at cost, a small welfare for the members. Since the group was all present, we used the chance to start the day's material exchange. I asked Yueguk how much coal he had on hand, since I needed about 100 units, and he didn't ask what I wanted it for, just answered that 100 was no problem at 1 coal for 4 wood, and told me to send the order. It was a steep discount, since coal ran 5 to 6 wood on the open market, 1 unit burning for 6 hours against wood's 1, and at a higher heat besides. I didn't stand on ceremony, the mutual help in the group having built a good atmosphere, and sent the trade straight over to close the coal deal. Wang Jian then offered, seeing us finish, that he'd made a batch of water purifiers and planned to sell them once the acid rain test started in a few days. But anyone who needed one now could send a trade at 80 wood. The whole group jumped on it, me included, since with or without acid rain a water purifier was a necessity, and I sent my application along. The purifier came back as a 1-meter rectangular tower, water poured in the top inlet, a wooden bucket set at the bottom outlet to catch it, and a window in the middle working area for adding charcoal, the system's note saying ordinary materials, that it cleaned water quality and ran better with charcoal. The charcoal detail surprised me, though it tracked, since charcoal genuinely worked as a purifying agent. I set the purifier in the kitchen, poured in a barrel of river water to test it, and let the group's trades carry on. Song Aru announced she'd gotten a shelter facility today, a nursery she could plant herbs or food in, and asked anyone with spare seeds to trade them over. Then showed its stats. A nursery, excellent quality, 20 cubic meters of planting space, crop growth time cut 30%. Better with fertilizer. This was a resource building, exactly the thing I needed to push the shelter to level 3, and I looked at it with open envy, stuck as I was on both the resource building and the core altar. Som Aru went on that she'd brewed a few bottles of antidote, but, short on medicinal materials, could trade only 1 bottle per person, asking us to pay in stone at 150 stone a bottle. She showed the description: an antidote, tier 0, excellent quality, granting immunity to all poisons for 10 minutes after drinking, able to clear rank 0 toxins and suppress rank 1 ones. Yu Yang gushed that she was incredible to make even this. Wang Jihyun said he genuinely felt like he was living in a game, and Yu Soyol marveled that the world held too many supernatural things. I thought privately that they'd be even more shaken if they ever saw life water. Antidote was a lifesaver at the right moment, and everyone traded eagerly for the life-saving stock. With no new items left to trade, the meeting wound down, and we shared some discoveries, most of which I already knew, except Yu Agik raised something new, that wild animals were evolving fast. He'd found a wolf pack near his shelter, whose alpha had been ordinary quality before but had risen to elite, the pack's speed and strength climbing across the board. My heart trembled at that, because I remembered the mutated python from today and the mountain boar I'd seen on the back mountain before, both larger and stronger than ordinary animals, which I'd written off as natural strength but now realized might be evolution since coming to the shoe world. The others were worried too, Yu Yang most of all, his shelter's surroundings still uncleared. It seemed the dangerous animals near his shelter needed clearing in time before they grew into a real threat, and I decided to head to the back mountain tomorrow, since it was time to settle scores with that mountain boar. Watching the group slowly go quiet, I exited the chat, since I had my own preparing to do for tomorrow. First, I went to the workbench and queued 2,000 units of toilet paper, since judging by the group's reactions, I didn't have to worry about moving it. I'd been going non-stop since I got back, and hadn't eaten dinner, so I grabbed the last piece of roasted civet meat and some dry rations from the kitchen, and filled my stomach, washing it down with excellent honey water. While I ate, I opened the channel, found the survivors who'd sold warm stone, ice crystal, and black iron wood before, and ordered 50 units of each, the prices having dropped hard to a total of 350 wood. These materials weren't worth much, and sold poorly, basically dead inventory now, future trades needing a pre-order. I was buying them as synthesis fuel, since I'd worked out a slightly stable formula the night before and meant to repeat the experiment. After dinner, I gathered the materials I'd laid out, focused my mental energy, and summoned the synthesis furnace, since I wanted to run a test before anything else. I pulled out the exact set that had given me the explosive stone the night before. 1 crossbow bolt is the main material, with 5 wood, 1 warm stone, and 1 coal as auxiliary. Fed them in one by one and confirmed without hesitating. A flash of blue light passed. A red stone dropped onto the tabletop, and the furnace told me I had a blue explosive stone again. It had worked, the rule clear at last, that if the synthesis materials were identical, there was a real chance of pulling the same item. And the excitement of it ran through me, since this was the first time I'd ever synthesized the same thing twice. One success proved nothing, so I calmed myself and ran the identical set again, and this time the blue light coughed up a plain crossbow bolt, an enhanced one rated fine with a 30% boost to hit rate. The main material had been upgraded instead, and I felt a flicker of disappointment, since the mutation clearly wasn't a flat 100%, both an enhanced result and an outright failure still on the table. I refused to leave it there and ran the experiment twice more, both times landing explosive stones, which confirmed it cleanly, that the same materials could yield the same item but the odds stayed random, the result swinging between a copy and enhancement of the main material, and a flat failure. After tucking away the stones and the bolts, my mental energy had bled down to 2 points, my hard floor, since I always left 2 in reserve. A man surviving alone couldn't afford to run his head dry, because dull reactions in a crisis got you killed. Better paranoid than dead. I cleared the table and picked up the cage with Little White inside, and the small creature still looked like it hadn't recovered, listless and limp on the cage floor. I wondered whether the little thing was sulking, and whether the system had some kind of beast-taming skill, because at this rate there was no telling when I'd ever bring it around. I'd never kept a pet in my life, and couldn't read what state it was in, and unlike the Horned Bee Queen, who came with a controller to talk through, Little White gave me nothing to sense its mood by. All I could do was feed it and wait until it warmed up enough to leave the cage. I set the cage by the bed, looked at the creature gently, told it goodnight, and reminded myself that whatever else, the shelter had one more member in it, and felt that much less empty. One more mouth, one less silence. Then I killed the light and slept. Shu World, Day 7, light fog clearing to sun, temperature 9 to 20 degrees. I woke before dawn and didn't go straight to my blade work, going first to check the fire poison thorn vine. Standing at the fence gate, I lost myself a little in the sight of it, because overnight the vine had crawled across half the front fence, its fiery red leaves swaying in the wind, and every hard wooden thorn turned outward. The whole thing fused with the fence into a thorned wall. Anyone who charged that wall would die on it. The security of that landed warm in my chest. As I stepped closer, the vine reached a tendril out to me on its own, and when I stroked it, a thought came back, a want for more nutrients so it could wrap the rest of the fence faster. I told the vine the growth fluid was spent and it would have to grow slow now, then opened the inspection panel and read it back. A fire poison thorn vine, tier 0, boss quality, its fire poison boosted 50% and carrying a passive skill called mutation evolution that let it adapt and evolve off the environment. And raw energy, the panel naming it a transcendent moving plant that snared prey in its vines, pumped in fire poison and killed. I realized that the fence, the thorn vine, and the arrow tower together, once the vine swallowed the whole shelter, would let me say plainly that no rank 0 enemy frightened me, that however many came, they'd all die on the hedge. I pictured the shelter's future shape, a giant armored hedgehog, and the image cheered me considerably. The catch was feeding it, since the vine ran mostly on animal and plant corpses, fertilizer or agents like the growth fluid, and corpses were brutal to come by with every survivor chasing them, though growth fluid I might at least buy, since most people had no use for it yet. I went back into the stone house and made breakfast. 2 zebra steaks and some red umbrella mushrooms I'd gathered, boiled into something I generously called a stew, since salt was the only seasoning I owned. The ingredients carried it anyway, the flavor fine even plain boiled. Afterward, I opened the trade channel to collect on yesterday's small round shields, and my reeds soured fast, because half the batch hadn't moved and not one of the 100 priced in glass had sold at all. I dug into the trade listings and saw why. Several of the big survivor alliances having dumped enormous lots of small round shields, large square shields, vine shields, and leather shields onto the market all at once. The market had no shortage of shields now, mine drowned in the flood and priced too high besides, and the sales had cratered. The fat profit days for shields were ending. Nothing good ever lasts here. I'd cut the price to clear this batch, then watch before making any more. I dropped the remaining 300 small round shields to a flat 12 wood each, and listed the 2,000 toilet papers I'd run the day before at 2 wood apiece. By the time I finished, the sky had brightened, but the fog outside hung thick with visibility around 100 meters, so the mountain boar revenge I'd planned for the morning had to wait for it to lift. I shed my rattan armor, took the tang sword into the yard, warmed up, swallowed a red fruit, and ran the Mystic Void Blade technique. Each red fruit in session bought me roughly 8 to 10% of proficiency, and by the time the morning's work was done, the technique sat at mastery, 14%. The fog cleared toward noon. I washed quickly, ate the leftover stew and a cup of honey water, pulled my rattan armor back on, took the tang sword, summoned the horned bee swarm with the controller, and set out for the back mountain. With the swarm leading, I reached the gentle slope I'd climbed before, rested a moment, then sent the bees ahead to scout. The forest was still unfamiliar, but I moved through it steadier than the first time, retracing my path to the spot where I'd harvested red fruit, the marks of that old fight not yet swallowed by the undergrowth. The mountain boar's range couldn't be far from here, so I scattered the swarm to search, since spotting the beast early would let me set the battlefield before it ever saw me. Then a few bees came winging back, and I muttered in surprise that they'd already found something. I got up and followed the returning swarm at once, the bees able now, after their consciousness training, to roughly tell a real beast from a rabbit. No more mistaking small game for monsters. The thing sat about a kilometer ahead and hadn't moved, the swarm confirming when I sent them to recheck that the prey was still in place. I went serious, shield on my left arm, crossbow in my right hand, eased the branches aside, and held my breath. And what met my eyes wasn't the mountain boar I'd braced for, but a gray antelope. My gaze must have pricked its nerves, because it stopped grazing, lifted its head, stamped uneasily, and gathered to bolt. I was faster, pulling the trigger the instant I read it for an antelope, and the bolt took it in the hindquarters as it broke into a run, the creature seemingly unaware it had been hit, vanishing into the trees. I wasn't worried watching it flee, since my legs would never run it down, so I set the swarm to chase by air and follow the tracks. The antelope slowed as it bled, and the bees, untroubled by the forest, closed fast, several landing on its back to drive in their paralytic venom. By the time I caught up, it was down, drained by venom and blood loss, a pool of red spreading under it, and I drew the tang sword, finished it with one stroke, and ran gathering, which gave me 4 blue steaks and 1 white animal hide. A decent take. I pocketed the dropped wooden chest, ordered the queen to keep hunting the mountain boar, and worked the nearby ground for resources while the swarm searched. I half-crouched behind a boulder, poked my head out and fixed my eyes on a distant rock face, where sparse pines clung to the steep stone and a cave opened where the wall met the mountainside. The mouth ran 3 meters wide and 4 high, narrow at the top and broad at the base, a sheet of green vines hanging down to half-curtain it. The swarm had led me to 3 other spots already, all holding nothing but small game, and this cave was the 4th suspected boar lair. I'd all but confirmed it, the rock at the entrance furred with pig hair where the boar had rubbed itself, and listening close I caught a steady grunting from inside. The bees had flown in and reported a single beast within, and I calmed myself and thought it through, since I didn't know when the boar would leave the cave and couldn't wait around. If it only came out to forage at night, I'd lose my window today, which meant I had to take the initiative. My advantage was that the enemy lay exposed, while I stayed hidden, I reasoned, so I needed to read the inside of the cave and strive for a single decisive blow. I crept to the side of the mouth and eased my head in, and luck held. The cave shallow enough that bounced sunlight lit it. A mountain boar over 3 meters long, lying with its head toward the entrance, its snores rolling like thunder. I scanned the ground out front, a gentle slope, no cover but the boulder I'd hidden behind. The trees there likely cleared by the boar itself. An idea formed. I patted the horned bee queen's little head, and admitted I'd have to play my trump card. Time to cheat. I drew the controller and sent the queen drifting carefully into the cave, the boar dead asleep and paying a wasp-sized insect no mind at all, which was exactly my opening. The queen settled on the boar's neck and slid her stinger out, because I meant to spend one of her venomous stings to guarantee this, her paralytic load brutal against a rank 0 beast. The stinger pierced the neck, the small wound nothing to the boar, no reaction at all, and the queen pumped her paralytic venom, shed the spent stinger, and flew out fast. I pulled the rest of the swarm back from the cave, since they'd be no help in what came next, and ordinary horned bees probably couldn't even break the boar's hide. I took out 2 explosive stones, cradled them, and waited beside the mouth for the venom to bite, and then the boar's snoring cut off. It had felt something wrong in its body, I knew, so I moved at once, hurling both stones at the waking boar and dodging clear of the entrance, the ice pattern repeating crossbow already in my hand. Inside, the boar had only just registered the trouble, opening its eyes to 2 small red stones streaking at its head before they detonated on impact. I heard the blast from outside, felt the rock wall shudder at my back, dust and rubble sifting down. When the smoke thinned, I looked in and found the huge boar swaying upright, lurching for the entrance, 1 ear gone, 1 eye blinded, half its head a bloody ruin, the whole animal stunned senseless. I worked both hands on the trigger and rained bolts into its head, with its skull spinning and no way to dodge. Not one shot missed, every bolt sinking into the bloody pulp. No mercy for a thing that size. The boar shrieked, and I shoved the crossbow away, drew the tang sword, and stepped in fast, unleashing my mastery-level mystic void blade technique. A step, a lunge, a straight thrust, every ounce of strength riding the blade as it punched into the boar's skull from the side where the bolts had clustered. The head jerked up, a tremendous force stinging through the web of my hand, so I let go, leaped, and hammered the serpent skin shield down on the hilt to drive the tang sword fully into the skull. The boar cried out, staggered back 2 steps, and crashed down, its fatty flesh twitching. The system told me I'd beaten a formidable enemy and earned a silver combat treasure chest. And the instant I heard it, I knew I'd won, my taut spirit slackening, my body going soft because as short as the fight had been, I'd thrown every scrap of focus and strength into it. I breathed deep, steadied, and went to read the boar, the panel naming it a mutated mountain boar of leader quality, thick of skin and flesh, and immensely strong, though dead it showed only the description and no further stats. I gripped the hilt and pulled, and the sword wouldn't budge. It had sunk too deep to draw at all. I rubbed my head, distressed since this was my only blade, and I half feared the system would turn the sword into an iron block when I harvested the carcass. I muttered that probably not, since the shoe world wasn't an idiotic system. With no tools to butcher the thing, I bit down and ran gathering. Light swallowed the whole boar, the harvest seeming to drag a beat longer than usual. And as it faded out, I read my take: 25 blue steaks, 5 orange beast hides, 10 blue beast bones, and 2 blue beast teeth. 25 fine steaks, a glorious haul. And I beamed, since between this and what I had, I wouldn't run short of fine meat for a good while. The orange beast hides drew a sigh, because if only I could steer the synthesis talent, 5 orange hides could surely become an orange defensive piece. I stuffed it all into the backpack, then spotted the tang sword lying where the boar had vanished, and picked it up grinning, only for the grin to freeze. The tip chipped a little, likely cracked when I'd rammed it into the skull. I'd make do for now, since every survivor was short on weapons, and I'd find a way to a better sword later. I'd assumed the tang sword would carry me to rank 1, so much for that. It stung. The synthesis function wasn't reliable enough to risk on it either, since a mutation or a failure would cost me a sharp weapon I couldn't quickly replace, and the chip wasn't bad enough to gamble over. The hunt had a flaw, but it was done safely. A major threat lifted off the shelter. A success overall. Before leaving, I searched the cave and found only animal bones and wild fruit. The boar not long settled there. I didn't linger in the mountains, descending the same path, and since I'd already searched on the way up, I didn't stop, cutting the return short. At the foot of the slope, I detoured to check my 5 beast traps. 4 empty with the bait gone, only 1 holding a catch. A wild chicken. I reset the traps, lashed the chicken with vines, and hurried home without stopping, the dark already down by the time I reached the shelter. Fog had risen before nightfall, and only the swarm leading me kept me from getting lost in the dark mist and missing my way back. Next time I'd watch the clock far closer, the lingering fear of that black wilderness still sitting in me. The work piled up the moment I was inside, so I built a coop of wood for the wild chicken beside the thorn vine, set out food and water, and ordered the vine to mind it and not let it run. I wondered whether the chicken would lay eggs, since otherwise it was just emergency rations. I gave the horned bee queen 50 grams of royal jelly as the day's hero, hoping the jelly might even push her to evolve. Then ate 2 bowls of instant noodles with bird eggs. Too late to bother roasting meat. With my hunger handled, I pulled the day's 2 chests, 1 wooden and 1 silver, and cracked the wooden one casually, which gave me a latex mattress, a sportswear set, and an outdoor headlamp. No more sleeping on a hardboard. I'd loved a soft bed back on Blue Star and had been waking with a sore back for days. The sportswear was a welcome extra change of clothes, and the headlamp was a rechargeable type with a cable and a yellow forehead strap. I tried it on, the brightness leagues past a torch and a hand-free besides, and with my solar power bank I'd never lack a way to charge it. The wooden chest had been all practical, so I eyed the silver one hungrily, my second combat chest, hoping for an altar blueprint or a resource blueprint inside. It opened in a flash of light that left 3 orbs on the table, 1 blue and 2 orange, and I crowed at 1 fine and 2 rare items. Going low to high, I crushed the blue orb first and found a white box marked with a red cross, plainly medical. The panel called it a fine medical kit. Rank 0. Its effect boosted 30%. It was packed with 10 hemostatic bandages, 5 vials of disinfectant alcohol, 30 anti-inflammatory pills, 30 painkillers, 3 adrenaline shots, a hemostatic clamp, and bandage scissors. A survival essential. A real surprise. Nobody in the shoe world dodged injury forever, and listed on the channel this could fetch even an orange price, given it saved lives. A pity there was no cold medicine. I added, the weather turning, colds coming easy, and for survivors short on clothes and medicine, a cold could turn into a life or death thing. I set the kit in the bedroom and picked up an orange orb, puzzled since the shape inside looked like a basin. I crushed it, and what surfaced was a palm-sized model of a hot spring, lifelike down to the mist drifting off its surface, which left me more confused, not less. The panel named it a geothermal hot spring, rank 1, rare quality, recovery speed up 50%, and 1 drop of spiritual spring milk produced per week. The description explained that Earth Vein's spiritual chi had lifted an ordinary spring to a rank 1 rare spiritual spring, one that sped stamina and injury recovery and yielded a drop of spiritual spring milk every 7 days. A Saint-grade healing item, so this was a resource building. I exclaimed it aloud, delighted. This was the very thing I'd been hunting for days, a rank 1 spring that gave both healing and water. The model worked like the shelter core, the shoe world having miniaturized the spring, So once I found a good spot to place it, the world's power would connect it straight to the earth veins. I looked at the black night outside, swallowed the excitement, and resolved to set the spring at first light. I dropped the model into inventory and crushed the last orange orb, a blueprint, hoping hard for an altar. It was a training ground blueprint instead, rank 1, rare quality. Focus in training up 50% and training injuries down 50%. The extra attributes only working for rank 1 and below, demanding 1,000 stone, 1,000 wood, and 200 iron blocks. Not an altar, and I sighed that altar blueprints were truly rare. Still, I adjusted fast. An auxiliary training building was well worth having, exactly the silver chess's caliber where every item earned its place. And I thanked the mountain boar for the gift. With only an altar left between me and a level 3 shelter, a compulsive itch took me. So I opened the trade channel on the off chance some fool had listed one. The toilet paper and shield records popped up first, reminding me I'd never checked the day's later sales, and when I opened my shop both the shields and the toilet paper had cleared. The toilet paper especially, since I'd capped no per buyer limit and several orders had run past 1,000 units. Toilet paper sold beautifully, a fine flagship product going forward, and I'd queue another 7,000 shortly. I'd been rushed during the day and hadn't looked close, so now was the time to work out why the small round shield price had cratered. I'd cut 8 wood off each shield earlier, which rounded up to a real loss, so I trawled the trade and chat channels for clues. After a long search I looked up with a sigh, understanding the whole shape of it, and finding I was partly to blame. The big survivor alliances like the Summer Alliance and the American Alliance kept experts studying the trade channel around the clock, not only chasing rare items but researching the profit and demand on bulk goods. My high-priced shields had walked right into their sights. Common materials, high demand, fat margins, and a huge internal need for shields of their own. So the alliances had launched a wave of recruiting and buying, paying heavily to corner blueprint holders and even the survivors who could craft shields. Someone had tried to reach me early too, but couldn't, since I'd found those people irritating and blocked the lot, though even reaching me would have gotten them nowhere. With the alliances in, blueprint holders bought out, and their vast base resources behind it, shield production soared. The market flooded, and once other alliances piled in, the price fell under the weight of the sell orders. That explained the crash. But one thing still stumped me. How had they jacked up their output so far, when even with endless resources a workbench could only make so many shields a day? A level 2 shelter came with a level 2 workbench, and a level 2 workbench ran only 2 tasks at once, each shield costing time, so a sudden glut meant either a flood of new blueprints or some way to boost workbench efficiency. And a sudden blueprint flood seemed unlikely. I found the answer fast in the chat channel, a kind survivor replying to my question with an item description and some notes. A shelter building expansion scroll, the reply read. Let us shelters built in buildings gain an extra function. So in a workshop, fireplace, or bedroom, the scroll could add 1 attribute, up to 3 per building. A workshop able, for instance, to gain a production boost attribute. I'd been too busy lately to comb the channels and had missed it, but it wasn't too late, and searching scrolls in the system turned up several other good items I'd never seen. A building upgrade scroll raised a shelter building's level for extra materials. A building quality improvement scroll lifted a building's quality for valuable materials. And a beast taming scroll tamed non-intelligent animals into obeying the survivor. The first 2 were only chat channel descriptions with no actual stock for sale, but the beast taming scroll, smaller in audience, had a seller, a rank 0 scroll listed at 500 wood. I messaged the seller that his scroll only tamed rank 0 animals and only ones that couldn't resist, that 500 was steep, and offered 300. He was clearly online, firing back at once that it was a mysterious power, and 400 was his floor, less than that and he'd keep it himself. I haggled a few more rounds with no give, checked several other scroll sellers whose prices ran about the same, and finally took it for 390 wood. The scrolls panel confirmed it needed a rank 0 target unable to resist, after which the tamed creature could simply grasp the survivor's commands. This would work on Little White, I calculated. If the creature became a system-recognized pet, its good luck attribute ought to bleed over onto me. I was still eyeing that luck. I took the scroll and lifted Little White from the cage, still listless, and smiled at it, spinning a pitch about how dangerous wild survival was, living hand to mouth how following me meant safety and good food and comfort, asking where outside it would ever find honey water like this. I produced the honey water, dangled it in front of the creature, then put it away. Little White's eyes went wide, darting after the honey water, and when it vanished, the creature glanced at me and flopped back down to stare at nothing. I knew the little thing was clever, that forcing it wouldn't do, so I'd tempted instead, taking the honey water out again, adding a few extra drops of premium honey, and setting it down with the promise that if it didn't resist in a moment, I'd give it honey water every day from here on. I nudged the bowl closer and eased toward it, and Little White's eyes lit at the nearness of it, since it had tasted honey water the day before and knew how good it was for it. The instant Little White dove into the bowl, I quietly opened the beast taming scroll and used it, white light spilling from the scroll and washing over the creature, which never broke off its drinking. and the scroll slowly faded as the system told me the taming had succeeded. I focused my mind and could faintly catch Little White's mood now. Thoughts of tasty drink and food coming through, and per the scroll's notes, my sense of its consciousness would deepen over time, while its intelligence climbed, letting it grasp my words and its loyalty rise. The honey water had it visibly brighter, no more thoughts of escape, and it padded to my feet and lay down. I hoped aloud it would bring its master luck, truly wanting that blessing, then set it on my lap and went back to work. With the shield crash understood, I checked the trade channel for the current shield price, and a small round shield ran 11 wood now and still sliding, against a cost of 7 wood, leaving a margin of 3 or 4, a steep drop, and the sales were slow on top of it where they'd once cleared the instant they listed. I decided to drop small round shields for the moment and switch to a new lead product, since I had no intention of joining a shield price war my scale couldn't sustain. As I went to queue the toilet paper, a private message came in from Wang Ro, who traded me the recliner blueprint, sending some Blood Fiend Alliance intel and his general harvest for the day. I shook my head over the man, since it was as though my overwhelming presence had conquered him into insisting on being my subordinate, reporting his haul daily and gathering Blood Fiend Alliance intel on his own. A level of initiative to delight any capitalist. I had no interest in his harvest and no wish for an underling, but none of that dampened him, and since I couldn't well block an acquaintance who'd given me a good deal on the recliner blueprint, I answered casually a few times and traded him 5 wood as encouragement. After Wang Ro, I went to the workshop and ran 100 crossbow bolts first, since the boar hunt had scrapped my last batch, then queued 7,000 toilet papers, a job that would run until tomorrow. If only I had an expansion scroll, since the workbench felt painfully slow now that I knew what was possible. Back at the table, I rubbed Little White and pulled out the day's synthesis materials, deciding to make a few explosive stones first to restock, since the thing was simply too useful. Half my boar hunt success owed to its power. I summoned the furnace, loaded the materials and confirmed, and the panel handed me an enhanced crossbow bolt, which left me utterly bewildered. I ran it again, the blue light flashing into an explosive stone. The first had been a fluke, surely. I counted myself reasonably lucky, and certainly no unlucky man. To prove it, I ran one more. Out came another enhanced crossbow bolt. I stared at the thing on the table, feeling somehow personally insulted. I insisted my luck was only average right now, probably worn thin from all the chest opening earlier and not yet recovered, since I wasn't usually like this. I glanced at Little White and felt distinctly looked down upon, so I reached over and rubbed its head hard twice, begging it to lend its master some luck, explaining that master had burned too much luck opening chests for the family. Little White gave me a faint look, squeaked, and stretched a small paw out to touch my hand, as if to say I'd still have to rely on it. Whether it would help, I couldn't say, but the interaction cheered me, and I declared it a bad night for explosive stones and decided to try something else. For the main material, I'd use the saddle and reins, which I had no use for and wouldn't miss, with 8 units of bone as auxiliary, and the panel offered 75% success against 70% mutation. Average success, high mutation, but good either way, since an enhanced saddle would do me no good, so I confirmed. My mental energy flowed slowly into the furnace, the familiar blue light rose, and the system handed me skeleton reins. It had worked, and I was glad even though the materials were worthless, since waste was shameful, the saddle gone and only a set of reins left. And I read its panel at once. Skeleton reins, tier 0, excellent quality, carrying the added skill charge, which on activation doubled linear movement speed for 10 seconds, with a chance to stun. The description saying a wave of the reins summoned a skeleton horse mount, tireless, lasting 2 hours, summonable once a day. A summoning piece. I called Little White my genuine lucky charm and told it to eat some honey and refuel. This turned me from infantry into cavalry, my mobility and combat power jumping in a stroke. I had to try it, too keyed up to sleep otherwise. Pitch dark outside be damned, and the day's single summon would be wasted if I didn't burn it. And waste was shameful. I hurried outside the shelter, took out the reins and summoned, and a swirl of black mist opened in the space ahead of me to leave a bone horse over a meter tall and 2 long, built entirely of snow-white bone. I leaned in and studied it. Its eyes 2 flickering black flames giving off a cold, desolate chill with no warmth at all. The vanished saddle now on its back but turned to bone itself and fused with the horse. I swung up, reins in hand, found I could steer the horse by thought alone, and with a thought set it galloping. I trotted it once around the shelter, and felt not a single jolt, the bone saddle oddly comfortable. The only drawback that the thing was a touch terrifying, since anyone who saw me riding a bone horse at midnight would wonder whether I was man or ghost. The ground around the shelter ran clear and open, but I didn't let the horse run fast, just circled a few more times to drink in the feel of riding, then dismissed it, the horse dissolving into black mist, and put the reins away. It had gotten late. I'd accidentally played until now. I washed quickly and lay down in the warm bed, sleep taking me fast, though just before it did I felt as if I'd forgotten to do something. Shoe World, Day 8. Mist clearing to sun, temperature 7 to 15 degrees, with a 3-day countdown to the acid rain trial and a fresh warning that beasts in the mist would be more savage and the kill drop rate higher. The mist, The fiercer beasts, the looming acid rain swept the sleep out of me at once. Reading the notice carefully, I understood the mist would thicken today, the beasts grown more aggressive under it. Going out riskier, but the shoe world had sweetened the drop rate to push high-risk, high-reward fighting. The chat channel was as expected, all speculation and field testing of the notice. One survivor warned visibility outside ran under 100 meters, and getting lost was easy. Another begged for help over a blurred shape stalking near their shelter that they didn't dare confront. Others snapped that those who refused to fight would simply die while wealth came from risk. Cutting through the panic, one survivor crowed that a fat rabbit had charged him stupidly in the mist, dropping to a single slash and even coughing up a treasure chest, and the channel filled with envy of his luck. The mist was thickening by the day. I shook my head, deciding overthinking it was pointless, that I'd eat, train hard in the morning and judge the afternoon by the conditions. Breakfast ran hearty, a bowl of instant noodles, a portion of dry rations, a cup of honey water, an apple after for the vitamins, and I gulped the honey water and sighed that for clearing the mind it beat coffee, that back on Blue Star people would have paid a fortune for it. Before my blade work, I needed to build the training ground, and after some thought I chose the open space in front of and left of the stone house, room enough there and a clear line on the outside while I trained. I checked the storeroom, 2,468 wood, 5,000 stone, 393 iron, 73 glass. Enough to build, though I noted I'd have to trade Yu Yang for iron blocks tonight, since the build would gut my stock and I needed reserves in case an altar blueprint let me upgrade the shelter outright. I took the blueprint to the living room, summoned the shelter core, laid the blueprint above it, and confirmed the familiar three-dimensional overhead view of the shelter rising up. With practiced ease, I set the training ground spot in the front yard, the warehouse materials melting into white light and draining away, and at the chosen spot a phantom slowly hardened into form. A shelter notice told me why the build had eaten so much, since I'd used all common quality materials, and high quality stock would have cut the quantity sharply. The materials vanished entirely, and the phantom snapped solid, and I walked over to a 10-meter square plaza paved in bluestone, split into areas, plum blossom piles for footwork, wooden dummies for strikes, and a martial arena with a weapon rack holding all 18 classical arms, sabers and spears and swords and halberds, and axes and the rest. I picked up an iron saber, slightly heavy in the hand, and the system offered to reshape a weapon into a familiar form, the first change free and later ones costing materials. With a thought, the saber became the horizontal saber I knew, and I swung it a few times, the feel good. Then a thought struck me and I carried it out of the training ground. The instant I crossed the boundary, the saber crumbled to dust and vanished, a horizontal saber reappearing on the rack inside. No loophole to exploit. I'd been testing whether I could walk a weapon out for free, good for trade and personal use both. But the shoe world left no gaps. Worth a shot. After touring the ground, I went to install the hot spring. Simple enough, the placement already chosen, directly behind the shelter against the rock wall, where nearly 2,000 square meters of unused space waited, a field I meant to farm later, the spring doubling as a backup water source. I set the model under the rock wall, stood clear, and watched it bloom into a virtual image of about 20 square meters that quickly hardened into a hot spring pool. I'd never seen a hot spring before, so I studied it with curiosity. A ring of bluestone wrapped the edge, a thick bed of pebbles showing through the water with the spring eye surely hidden beneath, and at the center a round stone pillar broke the surface, its top dished into a shallow bowl that held a single drop of milky white liquid. Per the build notes, the pool self-cleaned and the pillar gathered the spiritual spring milk. That white dropped the milk itself. The shoe world was generous for once, even tossing in a free drop. I pulled off my shoes but kept my clothes, wading in wearing the cat pattern combat suit, since its water repellent meant I needn't fear the wet. The pool about 1.5 deep, and waded to the pillar and dropped the spiritual spring milk straight into my item bar. A life-saving medicine to carry always. My slots worried me a little, the load growing heavier and the tent increasingly tight. Heading back to the front yard, passing the arrow tower, the sight of the horned bee queen jolted loose what I'd forgotten the night before, so I went into the tower's ground floor, where the Gu King bee box sat quietly in a corner, since I'd never checked the honeybees or set their evolution direction. I read the queen, a Chinese honeybee queen, rank 1, rare quality, swarm control up 50%, and honey quality up 50%. The panel naming her a gladiatorial victor who commanded more bees and lifted honey quality under her influence. Then the box asked me to pick the swarm's direction, and I chose logistics without hesitation, since the queen's attributes bonus logistics hardest, undeniably the right road. As I confirmed, the box fed back that it still lacked one swarm to fully activate its ability, which stunned me, since I'd assumed the current function was the whole of this rank 2 equipment, not realizing it only unlocked fully at 3 swarms. I picked up the controller and told the queen to build a nest somewhere around the shelter, and rather than fly off she chose the arrow tower's ground floor, sturdy and roomy and well suited to them. Exactly right. Before leaving I checked the counts through the box, the horned bee swarm at 1,200 and the Chinese honeybee swarm at 11,000. I went back to the training ground, stretched, and ate a red fruit, and the moment I began my blade work, I felt the ground's worth. since normally I had to run the Mystic Void Blade technique through twice before my mind cleared enough to immerse. While here I dropped into a self-forgetting state effortlessly from the first stroke. In that state, flashes of insight kept rising, my grasp of the technique deepening, and then I came awake with a jolt, muscles trembling, bones crackling, my whole body tightening as a wave of exhilaration rolled through me. I calmed my ragged breathing and read the changes, my muscles cut clean and smooth and powerful, rippling with speed and strength, and I'd grown taller besides, my upright bearing and the battles behind me giving me a sharp, capable air, a man wholly unlike my blue star self. The iron saber weighed noticeably lighter in my hand, so I opened the personal panel I hadn't checked in ages, reading my name, Jin C, rank 0, physique 7, spirit 6, perception 5, energy 0, the Mystic Void Blade technique at 27% proficiency, and my talent skill synthesis at level 1. No wonder the blade felt light. My physique up a point and proficiency climbed nicely. This training ground genuinely good. My technique not far now from major achievement. And a perfected Mystic Void Blade technique would add 2 physique, leaving me close to the 10 I needed for rank 0. I was about to glimpse the scenery of rank 1, when the joy settled it was already noon, and hunger struck, my strengthened body unable to ignore the emptiness. So I took the grill out, laid on charcoal, lit it with flint, picked 3 prime antelope steaks, seasoned them with cumin and salt, and set about real grilled lamb. Waiting on the meat, I absently chewed through a portion of dry rations. Gone the instant it hit my stomach. My appetite swollen and my gut a shredder now. I lifted a piece of fragrant grilled meat and chewed slow, each bite satisfying and filling, and noted that prime steaks ran high in energy, one piece already leaving me 8/10 full. My physique gain today owed in no small part to them. I grilled the rest and stowed it for tonight, rewarding myself with honey water, deciding I'd drink premium honey water regularly too, since one day my spirit or perception might just tick up. Eat well, hit harder. I liked this method of growing stronger. The fog hadn't fully lifted by noon, a thin haze still dulling the distance, but visibility ran around 200 meters now, far better than morning, so I geared up to head out, since the fog would only thicken later, and I couldn't sit idle. Just then a private message came from Songaru, saying she'd made a batch of fertilizer, low yield, only 10 units to spare for me, the rest hers. I'd wanted growth fluid to feed the fire poison thornvine into covering the fence faster, but found none for sale, and thinking it over I've remembered Songaru grew medicinal herbs often, and might have a way to get plant-promoting items, which was this fertilizer. I replied that any amount was fine and asked her price, since something beat nothing, and she answered bluntly, 100 stone, and though I didn't know the raw cost, the fact that nobody else on the whole channel sold it made it worth 100 stone, scarcity its own value. We closed it fast, everyone busy by day, no need for chatter. I applied 5 units of fertilizer to the vine and told it to stay sharp and guard the shelter, promising more when I returned, and the vine swayed a tendril at me as if it understood. I meant to range further today, out to a distant forest, the skeleton rains guaranteeing a fast trip home. Leaving the shelter, the swarm scouting ahead, I struck straight south, checking my beast traps along the way and finding nothing, resetting them for some destined animal. 3 hours later, I reached the forest edge, the farthest I'd ever traveled. The trip not wholly empty since the swarm had turned up a nest of rabbits, 4 of them paralyzed limp by the venom so I could twist their necks, all 4 into the backpack. I didn't gather them, since plump as they were only ordinary wild rabbits unlikely to yield prime meat, better kept whole to sell other survivors for materials. I'd misjudged the time badly. Only the forest's outer edge in reach now. The distance underestimated, the journey longer than I'd planned. In the dense forest, the sky shattered into strips between the tall trees, mottled light scattering through the leaves, the thin fog turning the place mysterious, and I walked it grave-faced, the swarm already spread around me to flag distant danger. Bird calls echoed through the canopy, and as I went deeper, occasional rustles marked insects fleeing in fright, and even with the swarm clearing my path, I took every step careful, mind locked tight, since this was a remote primeval forest where anything could happen. Not far in, I found a resource spot. A patch of hemlock trees glowing enticing blue under my detection skill. The panel calling hemlock a prime wood for bows and arrows. Far tougher than the black iron wood I carried and an excellent material for bow staves. I hadn't brought logging tools and had no time, so I only marked the location, knowing I'd come back for it. I kept on, casting detection as I walked, the most convenient search, the light dimming the deeper I went, the forest fog thickening as the sun fell. My face brightened when a few scout bees winged back, since they'd found a resource point. I followed them carefully, circling some 10 great trees, closing fast on the beast the swarm had found, when a wolf howl rolled out of the distance. My steps paused, my expression darkening, and I wondered whether the beast had stumbled onto a wolf pack. The swarm couldn't judge danger, so 1 or 2 wolves I'd not fear, but 3 or more could finish me, and after a long hesitation, I decided to abandon the prey ahead. Since wolves ran in packs and rarely alone, the odds of a pack greater than a lone wolf. My life not worth the gamble. Then the sound of a beast running carried over. If I heard right, it was swelling, closing on me fast, and my face changed hard. The wolf pack had found me. Panicked but not chaotic, I shoved the crossbow into inventory, scanned around, and scrambled up a large tree hand and foot, and just as I reached halfway the running sound arrived nearby, a gray wolf with bared teeth and a pointed nose breaking into view below. It was injured, I caught it once, so maybe not hunting me, several wounds on its back staining the gray fur red, and as I weighed that, 2 more figures chased out behind it. The pair ran smaller, dog-like, with short round heads, small eyes and ears, brownish-red fur dappled dark brown, and crouched on a thigh-thick branch I read them for hyenas, not after me but hunting the gray wolf. As I watched, the gray wolf out front stopped short, wheeled, and sprang off its hind legs straight at the trailing hyena, which clearly hadn't expected its prey to counterattack and took a paw across the face with a muffled shriek, the wolf's fanged mouth opening to follow up. The other hyena arrived just in time to bite at the wolf's neck, forcing it to drop the kill and dodge aside, and with the second hyena pressing its advantage, and the head-wounded first one rallying bloody to join, the two ganged the wolf together. I watched the 3 tangle below and drew the crossbow calmly. A one-sided fight made poor viewing, so on an opening I triggered the ice pattern repeating crossbow's ice arrow straight into the injured first hyena, which never saw the third party and took it full in the rear, shrieking again as it spun to find the shooter. Before it found anything, the gray wolf seized the moment, leaping to bite the back of its neck, the second hyena biting the wolf's belly to force it off. But a red light flashed in the wolf's eyes, and it took the gut wound without dodging and bit the first hyena's neck through. The first hyena had spotted the pounce and fought to dodge, but the ice arrow had gutted its speed by half, so it died with grievances. With its belly torn, the wolf kicked hard with its hind legs, striking the second hyena off it, a wolf howl breaking out as the hyena ripped a chunk of flesh from its abdomen, and the kicked-away hyena steadied, spat the wolf flesh, and pounced again, the two rolling together, tearing at each other. The gray wolf, badly hurt, was on its last breath after a few exchanges, so I raised the crossbow in the tree, drew with both hands, and worked the trigger without pause. 6 bolts streaking at the dominant hyena. The agile thing sensed danger and dodged. 2, took the third with a momentary stagger, then 8, 3 more and dropped. My face didn't change as I aimed steady at its eye and put a final arrow in clean. I wasn't coming down to find out it was playing dead. With the hyena dead, my taut muscles couldn't keep the grin off my face as I scanned the spoils. And I stowed the crossbow, slid down the tree, set the swarm on alert all around, and ran gathering over the 3 beasts. The wolf gave 5 blue wolf meat, 2 blue wolf fangs, 5 blue wolf fur. The hyenas, 6 blue hyena meat, 4 blue hyena fangs, 2 blue beast hides, and besides that pile of high-quality materials I picked up, 3 wooden treasure chests. The fight had run long enough to maybe draw other carnivores. So rich as the haul was, I cleared the battlefield fast, packed it away, recalled the swarm, and pulled out at once. A while later, in a grassy stretch near the forest edge, I squatted over a small plant in my hand. After withdrawing, I changed course and followed the swarm out, casting detection on the strange flora as I went. And this was what it had turned up. A blue glow on the ground so sudden and bright it had nearly dazzled me. A quick look had shown 40 or 50 of these high-quality herbs across a patch maybe 10 square meters. Reading the panel, I couldn't help beaming. So this was what picking money up off the ground felt like. A mutated agrimony, rank 0, high-quality potion effect up 30%. The description naming it a medicinal herb good as raw material for hemostatic, antitoxic, and stimulant potions with a certain insect repellent effect besides. Confirming it a treasure, I started gathering at once, hand on each plant, one by one, the steps cumbersome, my only regret too few herbs, and I worked it diligently, finishing in about half an hour with 58 mutated agrimony and 5 mutated agrimony seeds, the seeds plantable and able to reproduce. The 5 seeds were an unexpected gift, since reproducible seeds meant a whole field of agrimony someday if I planted them right. I stowed the agrimony and seeds carefully and hurried for the forest edge, the sky already dark by the time I cleared it. A thick fog under 100 meters visibility swallowing the sun and dropping the dark faster. I stood in the open outside the forest, took out the Goo King bee box, waved all the horned bees inside, kept only the queen on my shoulder to guide me, swung the skeleton reins in my right hand to summon the horse, and mounted. Reins gripped right, the bee box carried left. A thought sent the skeleton horse galloping for the shelter, and maybe because the horse ran too fast for the beast to catch me, I made it home without a single scare. Back at the shelter, I set the Goo King bee box in the arrow tower, took out 50 grams of royal jelly for the queen, the Chinese honeybees inside already settled and busy at their nests, and the fire poison thorn vine reached a tendril out to touch me as if in greeting. I applied the last 5 units of fertilizer beside its main stem, having learned through our mental link that fertilizer helped the vine and sped its growth, though I told it plainly that as huge as it had grown, the scrap of fertilizer was like a cup of water on a fire. The vine was a growing boy getting 1 meal of meat, useful but no real growth from so little, needing constant feeding I couldn't yet supply, so I'd have to let it grow on its own, which only underscored how precious that bottle of growth fluid had been, worth tens of thousands of units if converted to fertilizer. I soothed the vine, went into the stone house, shed the rattan armor and combat suit, changed into sportswear, and felt my body and mind ease considerably. After a brief rest, I went to the workbench, withdrew all 7,000 finished toilet papers, and listed them at 2 wood each, noting that as the scale grew, the production time stretched, 7,000 units now eating a full day, more than that and it would run past a day. 7,000 was the limit for a level 2 workbench. Exactly a day. Order at night and sell the next night. No room to push higher, since hoarding too long left me unable to react to the unexpected. The shield crash still nagging me off any urge to overproduce. With the toilet paper listed, I went to the kitchen, took out the day's roasted lamb chops, and lit the stove to heat them. Since I'd come back late, I'd just eat simple tonight. Lamb chops, instant noodles, and honey water. I didn't realize how much hatred those words would draw if I posted them in the channel, since even the Alliance big shots probably couldn't enjoy gourmet lamb chops with gourmet drinks. Full and content, I teased Little White that it hadn't even greeted its owner home, grabbing the creature unceremoniously from its nest, ignoring its flailing short legs, and rubbing its head hard. The little thing had adapted fast, near death yesterday and thoroughly comfortable now, only lifting its eyelids when I came in before sleeping on. And a glance at its food box showed a good amount of food and honey water gone. A healthy appetite, a life of abundance, far cushier than its owners. Unable to resist the big hand, Little White went limp and adopted an air of not caring at all. And after teasing it a while, I carried it to the table, grabbed the backpack and poured out the day's haul. 3 treasure chests still to open. I told Little White to share its luck, promising good food and drink and plenty of honey water once the chests were open, and waved a grand hand, the creature dancing with excitement at the mention of honey water, whether it understood or not. All 3 chests were wooden, no telling which was best, so I stroked Little White and cracked them one by one. The 3 chests gave me a cashmere quilt, a set of thermal underwear, a thick leather hat, 20 plastic, 20 glass, 20 compressed biscuits, 20 canned beef, 10 blue winter wheat seeds, and a solar streetlight, the pile stacking high in a flash of white light, the feeling of a harvest wonderful as I counted it. The plastic and glass were basic materials, into the warehouse and the cashmere quilt too, for now since the temperature still ran above freezing and I didn't need so thick a quilt yet. The thermal underwear and thick leather hat were winter clothes, to set with the cotton clothes Yu Soyol had given me. The compressed biscuits and canned beef were long shelf life strategic supplies, or dry rations for long trips. Into the kitchen they went, and the solar streetlight I'd install at the fence gate at first light, so I could see what moved outside at night. The only premium item was the winter wheat seeds, and I checked them first, the panel naming them cold hardy winter wheat able to grow through the Shu world's bitter winter, plantable and propagable. I read the seeds carefully and felt an overwhelming joy. Long live Little White. This was incredible, priceless, since propagable seeds meant that managed well. After a few generations of planting, I'd never worry about food again, a stable food source no longer hanging on hunting expeditions and chest luck, and unparalleled security. I put the seeds away carefully, wishing I could go plant them right then, but I knew I lacked farming experience and would need a professional to ensure a good harvest. And someone came at once to mind. Perfect, since I also needed to show that someone the agrimony I'd harvested. I sent Song Aru a private message with the agrimony's description attached, and a moment later her reply came, asking how much agrimony I had and what materials I wanted, that she'd take all of it. Agrimony was clearly useful to her, since I'd rarely seen her so eager, Song Aru having mostly struck me as calm and collected, unshaken if a mountain fell in front of her. I didn't tease her, answering straight that I had 58 stocks all premium. Song Aru, calmer now, came back without circling and asked for all of them, since the system had just told her both life water and detoxification potions could use agrimony as a main ingredient. With this agrimony plus some auxiliaries, she could make 8 bottles of life water and 6 a detoxification potion. I couldn't help showing a moved expression, since I'd used life water before, an instant heal for minor injuries, an extra life in combat, and I dropped my nonchalance and asked seriously whether she was sure she could make 8 bottles, whether she was joking. She replied with an odd feeling that of course she wasn't joking at a time like this, asking where I'd found so many premium herbs when she'd only gathered enough raw material for 3 bottles in all this time. The batch had clearly rocked her since she'd hunted the main ingredient non-stop since getting the life water blueprint, and scraped together only 3 portions, and I'd produced 10 at once, enough for 10 bottles if she hadn't lacked auxiliaries. Song Aru paused, then offered that she'd supply the auxiliary ingredients, keep only 2 bottles of life water, and give me all the detoxification potions, asking how that sounded, and I hesitated. No objection to the price, my hesitation only whether it was wise to hand all this agrimony over, whether I could trust her. Reading my silence as displeasure over the 2 bottles, she explained that her auxiliaries had taken a long time to gather, no less in value than 2 bottles of life water, her main purpose only to practice her craft, and the private message chime startled me out of my pondering. Recalling her selfless help before, I chuckled at myself, wondering aloud when I'd started prizing outside wealth so much. I sent a trade request 58 agrimony for 1 wood, agreeing to her terms and telling her we'd do as she'd said. It was only 58 units of agrimony, a loss I could well afford, and dealing with people meant giving your heart. Song Aru was stunned by the trade request. She'd been so flustered and excited by the agrimony that she'd overlooked its value and forgotten to settle on collateral to secure the rest of the deal. She quickly said to wait, that she'd buy a contract scroll on the trade channel, too excited a moment ago to think of the contract. I smiled faintly and told her no contract was needed, that I trusted her since trust took mutual effort, give and take, and without her earlier selfless gift of medicine I'd never have reached this complete trust. Song Aru was deeply moved at my message that I believed in her. But the strong heart she'd built working in a hospital quickly steadied her, though the smile in her eyes wouldn't be suppressed. She murmured that I believed in her, and she wouldn't let me down. Then she curved her lips and replied that all right, she'd go make the potions now and reach me when they were done. Without waiting for my answer, she took the agrimony and hurried off toward the workshop. I caught the message and said quickly to wait, that I had one more thing to ask, then waited and got no reply, my expression falling, my smile freezing, wondering aloud whether she was really that impulsive. After a long pause, certain no reply was coming. I shelved the question about planting seeds and turned my energy to other things. I sent Yu Soyol a private message to check her preparations, learning she'd spent the last 2 days harvesting cotton from the cotton field and expected to clear the whole field tomorrow. Her food and water prepped thin from energy limits, but planned to be filled by buying food off the trade channel tonight. Water needed no rush since I'd told the group earlier I'd fetch water on the last day, and she had to keep watching the channel for food, so we traded information fast and ended the chat. Then I replied to Wang Ro, a persistent man who messaged regularly to report his situation, his message already sent given how late I'd returned. I paid it little mind at first, but my brows slowly drew together, since the end of it said the Bloodfiend Alliance meant to make an example of him, to kill him so others on the regional channel would see the cost of betraying the Bloodfiend Alliance. I thought a moment and asked Wang Ro directly what was going on with the Bloodfiend Alliance wanting him dead. Wang Ro had clearly been waiting on me, replying instantly, begging Brother Jin for help, saying the Bloodfiend Alliance's enforcement hall had threatened him that day, that they'd teach him a lesson to show others the consequence of crossing the Bloodfiend Alliance. I was puzzled and asked how they'd found him and how they could even reach him, and he had no answer for the first, only the second sending me an item description for what they'd shown him. A one-time teleportation gate, the panel read, opening a gate to teleport to a specified location marked in advance. And reading it, I found it tricky indeed, that such an item existed and sat in the Bloodfiend Alliance's hands. Wang Ro kept messaging, pleading that I had to save him, think of something, or he was dead, since the Bloodfiend Alliance would surely kill him once they found him. A headache bloomed in me. What good idea could I have? I could only comfort him first, that an item like this had to be valuable and rare, that the Bloodfiend Alliance wouldn't own many or waste it on him, that at most 1 or 2 people would teleport in, that he wasn't without a chance. Then I asked when they were coming. He replied at once that he couldn't beat even 1 or 2, that they hadn't said exactly when, but that he'd heard from a friend inside the Bloodfiend Alliance that they'd stop recruiting for now and plan to take new members after the trial, that they'd likely use him as a sacrifice then. I pressed him to prepare fast, to set traps inside his shelter, asked whether he had ranged weapons, and offered to back him with a repeating crossbow if not, since with enough preparation killing 2 Bloodfiend Alliance members shouldn't be a problem. Wang Ro thanked me quickly, swearing he'd try his best to prepare and rely on me, saying it would be great if I could come too, that 2 against 2 would surely win, and at that message my heart stirred, a strange feeling welling up in me. Wang Ro sent another asking how to build traps, and with my train of thought broken, I told him the trap methods I knew, then ended the chat citing things to do. Wang Ro ended the chat expressionless, his manner turning suddenly fawning. He looked behind him and reported with delight that Brother Jin was almost hooked, that a few more asks and he could trade me a hearthstone, claim he'd bought it at a high price, and lure me over. Before his fawning smile sat a burly man half reclined in a wooden Grand Master's chair, in a black training uniform stretched like a leotard over bulging muscles. His coarse features fierce, 2 scantily dressed young women half kneeling beside the chair massaging his thighs with smiles. Hearing Wang Ro, the burly man cracked his eyes and glanced at the bowing man with indifference, calling him Four Eyes. He noted that this Jin Si had a large stock of supplies, that Four Eyes had guaranteed he could trick me there, and even asked for an extra blueprint. If it fell through, he wouldn't be punished given his recent contributions, but without my supplies, some of the people outside might starve, and he didn't know whether they'd blame Four Eyes. Then he shut his eyes without looking at the trembling man and went back to the 2 women's service. Back at my table, I pondered a long while but couldn't catch the fleeting inspiration from before, the effort yielding nothing, though the matter did remind me that the shelter's internal defenses needed to move on to the agenda, since if someone could teleport straight inside, fences and arrow towers were useless. I muttered that I didn't know where a teleport could land within the shelter and couldn't dig traps everywhere, deciding internal defense couldn't be rushed, that without understanding the teleportation mechanism, targeted defense was impossible, and that the present priority was getting through the acid rain trial. Thinking of the trial, I opened the trade channel and found the toilet paper sold out, mostly large bulk buys that had to be Survivor Alliance work. The more such big customers, the better. The harvest 14,000 wood. I collected it, queued another 7,000 toilet papers, and remembered wanting iron blocks during the day. So I opened Yu Yang's private message and asked straight how many iron blocks he could sell and what he wanted for them. Yu Yang, a deep internet addict who never left the channel, came back calling me brother and offering to just hand it over. And I took a breath, black lines on my forehead, and asked seriously whether he had 500 units. Unembarrassed, he chuckled that he'd been joking, that he had 300 to spare, and I didn't stand on ceremony taking all 300 and asking his price. Discussing it, Yu Yang turned serious and answered earnestly, market price, 1,000 wood, and 400 stone. And though he liked to play around, the price was fair, since on the open market 1 iron block fetched 5 wood or 4 stone, but the reverse trade ran harder and often demanded a premium. I sent the request without another word, took the 300 iron blocks, and told Yu Yang to come straight to me with any more later, since I'd be a long-term buyer. I stretched and sighed that I was finally done, not idle a moment since returning, that I'd synthesize a few things and then sleep, wondering how long this around-the-clock grind would last. Lying back on the recliner, I scrolled the chat channel in comfort. People adapted to life here now but inevitably lonely alone at night. The channel easing that loneliness and staying lively every evening. Time slid by until it was deep into the night, and I told myself I couldn't get hooked, that I'd rest after the synthesis and the card draw, and reluctantly left the channel, lowered my head, and stroked the little white creature on my leg, telling it to come, that it was time to contribute to the family again. I stroked Little White for luck, and laid out the synthesis materials I prepared earlier. I'd warm up on the explosive stone recipe I already had down cold. A crossbow bolt for the main material with 5 units of wood, 1 of coal, and 1 warm stone for the rest. I gathered my mental energy and summoned the synthesis furnace, set the materials in one by one, and confirmed the synthesis without bothering to check the success rate. It completed on the first try. The panel told me I'd gotten a single bursting flash stone. A good start. My luck ran good today, so I'd keep going while it lasted. With the flash stone tucked into my inventory, I drew out another crossbow bolt. This time I wasn't after an explosive stone. My blade work had come a long way. But the ice pattern repeating crossbow was still my main weapon, since close combat invited injury and finishing a fight from a distance carried the least risk for the most reward. So I wanted to try synthesizing some stronger bolts. I'd stumbled into a fanged armor-piercing arrow once before and been too reluctant to ever use it. The auxiliary material that time had been beast fangs, and as luck had it, I'd harvested a few good ones today. I tried to recall the old formula, a crossbow bolt for the main material, then 3 beast fangs and 3 units of black iron wood, and checked the rate. The panel gave me an 85% success and a 25% mutation. Numbers that high, I confirmed it at once. 1 point of mental energy drained away, and the synthesis furnace bloomed with bursts of blue light. A sure sign of success, and when the glow faded, a bolt lay on the table, giving off a cold gleam. I read it as an ironwood armor-piercing arrow, rank 0, premium quality, with an attached repel skill made from premium black ironwood and premium beast fangs to drive an armor-piercing knockback into whatever it hit. Armor-piercing and repel both, stronger than the old fanged armor-piercing arrow. I hadn't even expected the extra skill on top of the pierce. That gave me far more room to maneuver against an enemy. With 1 more set of materials left, I narrowed my eyes and ran it again, since more trump cards never hurt. I set the same materials into the furnace, fed it mental energy, and confirmed. The panel reported a second ironwood armor-piercing arrow, 2 of a kind. I rubbed Little White's small head, telling the greedy little thing it had done the family a great service today. Both arrows went into my inventory, since trump cards were meant to be carried. 1 last synthesis, I murmured to it. This time something new, and I hoped it would lend me its luck again. The creature let out a contented squeak from my arms. My spirits lifted at the answer, and I set the next main material on the table. The main material was the backpack I'd been hauling around on my outings. Decent on space, but worthless on the 2 things that mattered, since it couldn't reduce weight and couldn't hold living creatures. I wanted space equipment that solved one of those, and changing an item's nature meant chasing a mutation rather than a reinforcement, since even a reinforced backpack would carry the same 2 flaws. I'd already burned through my stock of materials testing combinations, finally settling on 5 units of black iron wood and 4 of ice crystal for the highest mutation chance. The panel offered 75% to succeed and 70% to mutate after, which was exactly the gamble I wanted. A good chance the thing would turn into something else entirely, and I confirmed. When the blue light faded, the furnace had already slipped back into my sea of consciousness. What sat on the table was no longer my battered backpack, but a sky blue box about the length of my forearm. The shade of a treasure chest, its material neither wood nor stone, but exquisitely worked and strikingly colored. I didn't waste effort guessing and just used an investigation skill on it. The panel named it a sky blue fresh keeping box, rank 0, premium. With a double space attribute, a 4 cubic meter space that couldn't hold living things, but kept any food inside fresh and unspoiled as long as the space held intact. I read it as an enhanced refrigerator, not the zero weight or creature holding gear I'd hoped for, but no loss at all, since it solved a problem that had started gnawing at me. Food storage had crept up on me. Meat used to be so scarce, I ate it the moment I had it and never thought about keeping any, but the recent flood of meat cutlets had forced the question. I had 60 units of premium meat cutlets now, half a month's eating even at my appetite, and no idea how long premium cutlets lasted before they spoiled, which meant another round of hunting the moment they turned. I got up, set Little White back in its nest, carried the box to the kitchen, and loaded in every premium meat cutlet, the red umbrella mushrooms, the apples, all of it, tallying as I went. 2 antelope cutlets, 22 zebra, 25 mountain boar, 5 wolf, 6 hyena, 25 apples, 56 red umbrella mushrooms, plus long-keeping rice, flour and instant noodles, enough to keep me well fed for a month. Just like that, the food crisis was behind me. While I sorted it, I noticed the 4 rabbits the horned bee swarm had paralyzed during the day, each about 3 kilograms, and I listed them all on the trading channel at 5 units of glass apiece, following my earlier scheme. I wouldn't have parted with rabbit meat at all if wood and iron blocks could still be exchanged for glass, but they couldn't now, so the rabbits paid the toll. I killed the light and dropped back into bed. I started laying out the next day's schedule in my head, drifting into a dream before I'd finished. In the dream, I half heard a scream. Out in the shelter yard, the fire-poisoned thorn vine had stretched 2 of its limbs slowly past the fence, dragging a dark figure back to the main stalk. Several thinner vines piercing into the figure like tentacles, and a soft rustling suck faded away into the night. Morning came with a system line telling me it was Shoe World Day 9, heavy fog, 3 to 15 degrees, with the acid rain trial countdown sitting at 2 days. I rose early as always, pulled on my sportswear, and went to make breakfast. I cooked a pot of rice porridge with a lamb chop for the main course, wishing aloud I could steam a basket of white flour buns, since it had been so long that just the thought set my mouth watering. Anyone who's ever dieted knows that after a long stretch without carbs, the craving for steamed buns rivals a bodily need, which is precisely why the people who actually lose the weight have top-tier willpower. I carried my food to the living room and set the bowl on the wooden table, and the instant I sat down I felt a tug at my pant leg, looked down, and found Little White had crept under the table. I asked if it was hungry too, bent to scoop it up and set it beside me, then fetched its bowl and poured in some rice. But it just glanced at the rice, stood upright, and worked its 2 front paws at me without stopping. I had no idea what it wanted, since I didn't speak mouse. The only thing reaching my consciousness was a vague insistence on wanting to eat. It got anxious at my confusion and squeaked loudly, then suddenly bolted off and came back having knocked over the wooden cup I usually drank from. And only then did I understand it wanted honey water, the little glutton having picked out the good stuff.